Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Yep, we're there. Let's go check YouTube. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. So who's going to be the first chat today? Yep, there we are. YouTube Live. Good morning. All right. Good morning. I don't know if you were sleepless last night. Yeah, you probably were. So I'm going to let you know the news right away so you can get on with your day. I lost the appeal. But I must be a somebody now because YouTube said, no way, I'm not putting that video back up for you. So I lost that appeal with YouTube. The Wayne vaccine video is going to stay down on YouTube, but it's up on Rumble. So go ahead and watch it on Rumble. Jason Lavigne MP everywhere. So on Rumble, you'll find my channel. And go watch that video that YouTube says you shouldn't watch. It's very good. We did not release any misinformation. The entire video is about Wayne's perspective. So do check it out, and I hope you enjoy it. And come back, give me some comments during the stream, and let me know what you think. So we also didn't get some good news yesterday. Bill C-11 is in the second reading. I'll let that one sink in because that one directly affects little old me. That's the online streaming bill. That affects creators and people who are making videos and putting them online because we're not currently regulated and we're not paid off by the media fund, which covers media around Canada. We don't get any money from that, so we're not paid off like that. They probably, started drafting it because of Rebel News. Rebel News is getting big. True North, there's some other ones. So maybe they were not so pleased with the truth coming out on channels that they can't control. So voila, Bill C-11. Second reading, Senate. It's not good, guys. It's not good at all. It's actually so bad that YouTube itself, their creators channel, released a video about it, warning creators about what's going to happen. So, how about we go ahead and watch that together? Because, yeah, let's talk about this to stream. So this is from YouTube itself. They read the bill. They understand what it's about. They understand what impact it will have because the bill will directly regulate YouTube, Rumble, and others. I'm not sure how they're going to do it, but the governments do have a lot of power when it comes to stuff like that. So it'll be interesting. So here's what YouTube has to say about Bill C-11, why we should be concerned with it as a creator, and how it may impact you as a viewer on what you're able to and allowed to see online, how it's presented to you, and how you find it. That's one of the most important things is discovery of the videos, being on the featured list, being on the homepage, popping up in the watch next algorithms and stuff like that. This is how your video gets spread. And Bill C-11 directly impacts that. So let's go ahead and hear from YouTube themselves on what they say. And then after that, I'm going to play video from a great Canadian content creator, JJ McCullough. And we'll go ahead and hear from him because he actually spoke, I believe it was in the House, about this issue. So he was very clear. Yeah, June 1st, 2022, he went to Ottawa to testify, parliamentary committee. So yeah, so he went and testified on this. So let's check this out. You'll learn a little bit more about what C-11 is about from the YouTube creators side. And then we'll take a look at from a YouTube creator in Canada. This is important, folks, because if we can't keep getting the message out and we're not allowed to hear other messages, good luck. Good luck to us all, because we're all going to be under the CBC thumb. And we already know what that's like. It's narrative and not news. So here you go. Let's check this out, and I'll make sure the audio is good.
Hey everyone, it's Brandon from the Brandon Gona Show, and I'm working with YouTube to share an update on some new legislation in the works in Canada. It's called the Online Streaming Act, or Bill C-11. Here are the impacts that C-11 could have on creators and users in Canada. It can determine how content appears on YouTube, including the homepage and Watch Next section. Plus, a regulator could force artificial promotion of some creators and content over others, which could impact how content reaches global audiences and could hurt views and revenue. Now, if this bill passes, it could have a huge impact on recommendations on YouTube, which means potentially a big change for Canadian viewers and creators like you and me. Now, to break down what this means, let's bring in Todd Beaupre, a director of product at YouTube, whose team helps manage what videos come your way on your home feed. Todd, let's talk about recommendations as they work now on YouTube. What are the basics we need to know?
Hey, Brandon, great to be chatting with you. So our recommendations are a really key part of our YouTube viewer experience. And we've designed them to really help viewers find videos that they would enjoy watching based on what each viewer is interested in. We really want to help them discover creators and channels that are going to be really interesting to them. It's kind of like if you go to the library and you have a librarian there to help you find the next book that you might enjoy reading based on other books that you've read.
So let's talk about how exactly this bill might play out on YouTube. Basically, we know a regulator could make YouTube show a certain amount of Canadian videos to Canadians. So does that mean you'd have to change the recommendation system?
So first, let me tell you a little bit about how the recommendation system works today. So we collect a lot of feedback from viewers in the form of like looking at what they watch, what they don't watch, how long they watch it, whether they click like or dislike. Really aim to recommend the best videos to each viewer based on their personal interests. And so as part of that, we aim to recommend Canadian creators to both Canadian viewers as well as viewers around the world who are interested in that sort of content or content similar to it, regardless of whether the video was uploaded in Canada or somewhere around the world. And by doing this, we're able to maximize the audience for Canadian creators.
Okay, so if Canadians get artificially served up Canadian content, what happens to the systems?
So what would happen is we'd end up mismatching viewers to videos that they would be most interested in. In the space of Canadian content creators, we would be showing their videos to people who would be less interested than other videos. And what that ends up meaning is the reaction from those viewers is likely to be that they're less likely to click on those videos. If they do click on the videos, they would be less likely to like them, or maybe they would dislike them or watch them a lot less. And so that negative feedback that we collect can actually have a ripple through the system, because it basically teaches the system that this content from Canadian creators isn't as engaging and satisfying as other content that is not getting kind of like pushed too much in the system. And so that could actually backfire by reducing how much that Canadian content gets recommended to other viewers. In fact, today, over 90% of the views on Canadian creator content come from viewers outside of Canada.
Can you explain a little bit more why that feedback loop is so important? Like, why would these negative signals hurt creators?
We protect this feedback loop very much. As an example, we keep our advertising systems separate from our recommendation systems. So if a creator were to buy advertising for a video, for example, we don't allow that activity to influence a viewer's recommendations, because we don't want that organic feedback loop from the audience to be tampered with, ultimately hurting Canadian creators and reducing their opportunity both in viewership and revenue.
And what about the viewer? Like, is it helpful to get served up Canadian recommendations?
When we would introduce, sort of artificial recommendations, it would hurt the viewers, because then we would be promoting recommendations that they wouldn't be interested in watching. They may end up deciding that they're not as interested in using the platform at all because they're not getting as relevant results. And so we really don't want to be recommending things to viewers that they're not interested in watching, because then they'll potentially leave, and that reduces the opportunity for everyone.
Thanks so much, Todd. So if you're a creator or a YouTube user watching and want to know more or add your voice to the conversation, click below on the description for details on how to get involved. Thanks, and take care.
Sounds great, doesn't it? Sounds great. Sounds like the government knows what they're doing. They'll take care of us. We can change our diapers too. My goodness. So 90% of the traffic that I could be expecting could be lost because the Canadian government says don't show outside of Canada. They only want to be shown to Canadians, and some of the Canadians aren't interested. As you heard from YouTube itself, creators will be impacted negatively. Viewers will be impacted negatively. And YouTube itself is worried that they'll be impacted negatively. If the viewer experience is not so good anymore and they're not getting decent recommendations that actually work for them, viewers will leave. This is what YouTube is worried about. I don't blame them. My goodness. Who's it good for? If it's not good for the platform, not good for the viewers, and not good for the creators, who is this good for? We know. Mr. Trudeau, whoever's in government, whoever has the nuke that video, nuke that stream, nuke that channel button, gonna have a lot of power. And my goodness, if I have to try and walk a tight line of regulation, what? No, we'll have to do something about that. So please go check out my tweet. I'm pushing a tweet. We're trying to get the hashtag #KillBillC11 trending. Because that's what we need to do. We need to kill it. Second reading in the Senate. And here is JJ McCullough's video. He testified at a parliamentary committee about this. And let me just pause it first here. Because he's a Canadian YouTube creator. 360 something best or most watched Canadian creator. And he's very passionate about this, of course. This is where he's spending his time. And absolutely, I am concerned because I don't want to be told what I can and can't say, especially when it comes to my Canadian audience. And I held back recommendation because my content isn't approved by the government. So yeah, let's go ahead and check this out. We'll talk a bit more about it. We got to stream today, so we're looking great on all that. But let's go ahead and take a look at JJ McCullough, his testimony. It is riveting. So let's get check this out.
Hello, friends. My name is JJ McCullough, and I am a professional YouTuber from New Westminster, BC. Today, I hope to teach the committee about Canada's vast YouTuber community and why so many of us fear Bill C-11, a bill we did not ask for, do not need, and threatens the success we've already achieved. My channel's subject matter is mostly cultural analysis with a focus on Canadian identity. My video topics have ranged from a biography of Wilfrid Laurier to the history of potato chips to why different political parties use different colors. My most popular video is about a Dairy Queen in my community, which has been viewed over 8 million times. Professional YouTubers like me earn a living from in-video advertisements, with ad revenue generally correlating with the popularity of our videos. A YouTuber's subscriber count can offer a very rough estimate of their channel's potential audience size. My channel recently passed 750,000 subscribers. In total, my videos have been viewed 230 million times. Now, these numbers might sound impressive, but I am actually one of this country's mid-level YouTubers at best. According to socialblade.com, I am merely the 414th most popular Canadian YouTuber. Indeed, according to Social Blade, there are over 100 Canadian YouTubers with over 3.5 million subscribers and over 1 billion video views. But popularity at this level isn't necessary for success. My friend Joe Lee is a professional Canadian YouTuber who makes videos about life in Vancouver and was recently able to parlay the popularity of his channel into his own clothing line. He has just 156,000 subscribers and 12 million views, making him the 945th most popular Canadian YouTuber. This should hopefully offer a sense of the size of the YouTuber community as a faction of the Canadian cultural economy. The tremendous success and even worldwide fame of many Canadian YouTubers in the absence of government regulation should invite questions about the necessity of Bill C-11. An unregulated YouTube has been a 17-year experiment, and the result has been an explosion of popular Canadian content produced by Canadians of every imaginable demographic. Now, much of the debate around Bill C-11 has centered on so-called user-generated content, which is often implied to mean frivolous social media posts. But Section 4.2 states that government is interested in regulating content that, quote, generates revenues, which describes the sort of videos professional YouTubers create. Regardless, it is important to understand that it is simply impossible to regulate a platform like YouTube without also regulating creator content. It's like promising not to regulate books while regulating what can be sold in bookstores. Hence, Section 7 of this bill states that online platforms must, quote, clearly promote and recommend Canadian programming. But what is Canadian programming? We know from the precedent of television that merely having a work produced by a Canadian is not good enough for the CRTC. The nationality of basically everyone involved, from editors to musicians to visual effects artists, must be factored in too. A detailed budget is expected, and the project's theme and subject matter must be explained. The CRTC website features countless forms TV producers must fill out in order to get their work certified as officially Canadian and thus worthy of promotion on Canada's heavily regulated airwaves. Most Canadian YouTubers shudder at the thought that this could soon be our fate as well. Given the broad powers of the CRTC, which Bill C-11 expands to include digital platforms, the Canadian YouTuber community is right to worry that the continued success of their channels could soon be dependent on their ability to make content that's Canadian enough to obtain government endorsement. Even more ominously, Section 9 of this bill says the CRTC can dictate, quote, the proportion of programs to be broadcast that shall be devoted to specific genres on digital platforms. Given that YouTubers make videos of every genre imaginable, from fitness to architecture to political commentary, it is frankly terrifying to imagine that government may soon have a hand in determining which genres of video are more worthy of promotion than others. In summary, anyone proud of the tremendous success of Canadians on YouTube should be deeply concerned about the damage Bill C-11 could do to their livelihoods. I also worry that the dreams of the next generation of Canadian YouTubers will become less achievable once they're forced to navigate intimidating new regulatory hurdles my generation did not. But most of all, I fear the damage that will be done to Canada's legacy as a global leader of cultural entrepreneurship once our online creators are forced to make narrowly nationalistic content under duress in order to win the favor of a government in denial of what we've accomplished on our own. Thank you.
Yep. And do you think the government they're going after the fitness ones, the cooking ones, they're going after the pet ones, they're going after the fun Dairy Queen videos, or the political commentary? Do you want to keep hearing from me? Do you want me to be biting my tongue the entire time? Because this will affect Rumble as well. Rumble is a Canadian company, Toronto-based. So most definitely they're going to be affected as well. So Rumble will not be the alternative to YouTube when YouTube says no. Because this is not a YouTube saying no thing. This is the government saying no. So yeah, who wants that? Do you really want your government saying your political commentator must stay away from certain subjects or we will deem it inappropriate and turn it down? If I go too far and criticize too far, will it just be a straight up ban? I just went through a YouTube ban and an appeal process. It's not fair. There's nothing fair about it. It's just, look, you've violated. We say you violated. We won't tell you where. We won't give you a chance to fix it. It's just gone. And if you do it again, you can't upload for a week. That's just YouTube about information they deem misinformation. I think the government is going to have softer gloves with that, or are they going to be a little bit firmer? And really, I know they're going to be going, that commentary over there, we don't like what they're saying. That is a violation. And that's that. As you heard, I may be forced to hire only Canadians when it comes to video editing and stuff like that. I'm a small guy. I got no budget. So being able to use freelancers wherever they are is vital. It's vital for entrepreneurs, especially if you are trying to do a lot of videos. This is not easy. There's a lot of work here. And that's incredible. Someone like me would have to keep the budget for my streams. I have to show the budget. I have to show the spending. What's going on? There's no way. There's no way. And then before you get worried and say, wow, it's only the big YouTube channels and stuff like that. No, they're going after anybody that's monetized. And I'm almost monetized just by doing this stream. You only need 1,000 subscribers and you need 4,000 hours. I'm just under 2,000 hours now and 300 subscribers or so. So before you know it, I'm going to fall into that camp where I have to be regulated because YouTube monetized me. I'm also already monetized on Rumble. So I fall into that category already. I don't make money. So I hope you guys, I don't make enough to even make a cup of coffee, but that's not the point. The point here is the regulation that's going to be coming down. And I definitely, I'm concerned about it. Can you imagine creators, young, old, having to navigate the regulations just so that they're not turned down on platforms. I don't want it. I don't want it at all. Good morning, Denise. Good morning, Prairie. Good morning, Connie. Nice to see you all again. Hi, Double A. You're new. Welcome. Thank you very much for coming, and you're welcome for the stream. Just so it understands what we do here. We start 30 minutes early. We talk about some stuff. Today we're talking about Bill C-11 because it just passed the second reading yesterday. Typically, we try to have Christine from the Canadian Constitution Foundation do a summary, but she didn't release one yesterday, which is fine because I think she was too busy liking and retweeting a couple of my tweets. So thank you, Christine. I got your attention. Your book is great. Everybody should read it. And absolutely, if you want freedom in this country, if you don't know what sovereignty is, or you do, but you want to see how we can implement it, pick up her free book. It's going to be in the ticker today. So go and check it out. It's really worth it. Rumble was down long time last night. Was it really? I wonder if there's some changes coming. I wonder if they're preparing for C-11. The second reading is a big step. There will be a vote. And my worry is these regulators, the senators, they don't understand the impact. Part of JJ McCullough's testimony, I really wish he didn't put in because I think it was counterproductive to the goal. And that's when he was talking about how many Canadian content creators there are and how many views. I think that's exactly what scares the government. When you hear stuff like 1 billion views from Canadian content that they have zero control over, that's what's scaring them. If JJ went in there and said, look, there's only 5 of us and we're doing like 3 videos a day and that's about it, it would be too small for them. But by telling them there's over 100 Canadian content creators that have 3.5 million subscribers and over billions of views, that is the reason why the government is putting this in, because they hate having large chunks of content that they have zero control over. And if you've ever been involved in music in Canada or movies or TV, for a little while, I was our company was purchased by Maple Music, a wonderful company in Toronto. They do a lot of management for artists. So I was exposed to the whole Canadian content requirements, how much the people behind had to be Canadian, the content had to be Canadian, there had to be Canadian spin to it. And in music, I kind of sort of got it because radio stations were finite, the amount of airtime is finite, and they were really trying to get Canadian content supported. So I kind of get where they were going with that. But I also see how bad it was. So we couldn't bring, like if we wanted to do a tour, there had to be so much Canadian content. So if we had a big non-Canadian artist, we would have to try and balance it. Their staff, when they come in with the roadies, it's a mess. It's a mess. And what it ends up doing is it waters down the content that Canada has exposure to and has access to. So moving it to the CRTC, I think the next step for the internet is to give them the we don't like button, the mute button, the smack their hand button, whatever they need to do at that day. They're going to let us know they're displeased, and away we go. Sorry about Rumble being down. A ban or next someone with a badge showing. Yeah, look. That's, yeah. First, it will be some sort of ban or email or warning like YouTube gave me. Here's a warning. We're being kind. We didn't like what you did. Do it again. You get punished. That will happen. But we did see things like in Ontario during the early COVID. If you posted on Facebook, we had at least one video where an OPP officer, looked like a PLT actually, a police liaison person, shows up at your door and just says, hey, we're just here to chat to you about your Facebook post. No, that's intimidation. 100% what they're doing there is showing up and letting you know that people with guns are watching you. And if you are not going to cooperate, they know where you live. They know how to knock on your door, and they're trained to do a lot more. So that's intimidation. Their attempt there is to remind you of what it is that you're up against. You're up against one heck of a large force, but it doesn't mean that it's impossible. So I'm going to keep getting my voice out. Bill C-11, we'll have to pay attention to it. I'm pretty sure a lot more information will be coming out if it passes. But maybe Rumble was preparing for it. The second reading was yesterday. Maybe they were doing some work on their systems. Lots of things went down yesterday. Yeah, Prairie. It's one of those days. It's just one of those days. Haven't heard back about Ford and his fight with the committee, but I'm sure we'll get some answers to that soon. All right, we got 5 minutes here. Good morning, Donald, Madre, Jason. For the greater good, we must ensure your safety from harmful information. Please step this way to adjust your wrong thing. Yep, there you go. That's exactly it. Pamper, diaper, coddling. There's a whole bunch of ways to look at this. We certainly do not need the government to continue to get into our lives and control it. I'm pushing hard to do the complete opposite. So things like this, I'm always going to be pushing against it because the government, they got plenty to do. They don't need more to do. They got to get what they need to get done right. They got to work on it and expand Canada, grow Canada, focus on the international markets, focus on the international reputation, get Canada up in that factor. And controlling your people, getting closer to more of a Chinese-controlled society isn't helping Canada. I don't think so, unless there's something I don't know. Thank you, Donald. And good morning, Clay. Nice to see you again. That little polar bear is awesome. Where are you at? If you don't mind telling me where you're at, Clay, you don't have to give me a GPS, Google pin or anything, but what province are you at? It'd be nice to know. You got a polar bear, so maybe you're in Manitoba. All right, folks, so 4 minutes away. Let's go check the stream. Let's bring it up. We're getting close. Right there. The screen's looking live. Yep, the number's ticking away. I hope it stays well. And if not, I do have my backups ready. So we'll be ready for that. And yep. So today we're going to finish up with the last witness. Let me get his name. Robert Bernier. We're working with Robert Bernier. So we'll be doing crosses this morning. We skipped Robert Drummond for some reason in the list, but it might have just been the preference of the committee on who they're going to bring first. So we may see Robert Drummond next, or Thomas Carrick from the OPP. So it looks like Wednesday and Thursday, we're going to get through 3 more witnesses, because Peter Slowly, I believe, is going to be a full-day witness, just like we had with Steve Bell, a full-day witness. So Peter Slowly is going to be here Friday, or be on Friday, is what I'm looking at here. So over 2 days, we should hear from 3 more officers. Maybe Thomas Carrick might be another full day. We'll see. We'll see how that rolls out. But what we do want is them to get as much testimony in, fill up the day as much as possible, so we don't start falling behind too far and we don't start needing extra hours and Saturdays. But we'll do what we got to do to get all this testimony in. Next week, we're going to have the convoy. It looks like the convoy organizers week is next week. And starting with Bridget Belton, James Bowder, Steve Charlin, Patrick King, Benjamin Dichter, Tom, I think Benjamin Dichter goes by BJ, Tom Marazzo, Chris Barber, and Tamara Lynch. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 scheduled. So that might be about 2 a day or so. Maybe Tamara's a full day Friday, because she's going to have a lot to say. And I'm sure Tom Mazzaro is going to be a full day as well, and Chris Barber. So, yeah, we'll be looking forward to that next week. I have confirmed with Tom that he will join our stream after he's testified. We've had some chats over the last 6 weeks, a month or so. He wants to be on the show, but he also has to be very careful. Because I'm a chatty program, it's not structured, and we don't really do stay away froms. So he wants to be as free as he can and join the stream fully, and that will have to come after his testimony, and I get it. So that's cool. And we do have a guest today at lunch. So Etienne from the Save Democracy of Alberta, he'll be joining us for basically the full hour. We'll also have Chris back. Chris is going to become a regular. He rocks. He's got a great BC perspective, a political perspective. And let's hear his voice while Canada allows it to happen. Friday, we have Donald Best joining us. It looks like he's going to check his schedule, make sure that he can make it happen. But the idea is Peter Slowly. So it's going to be all about the police and the chief. And Donald certainly has some takes on that, and some great takes on that. So we'll be hearing from him. Hey, Denise. I watched Foreign News yesterday. They wouldn't let me access Russia today. Yeah. Yep. Welcome to the new Canada. And it's just going to get worse if we don't stand up and fight. I know it seems like it's a David versus Goliath, but everything we do is going to help. The louder we get is going to help. And we do know that this government does take polls, does take the temperature of the audience and the public, and makes their decisions based on that. So let's go ahead and get super loud and make it happen. Yeah, VPNs, Donald. Yep, there's a bunch of things because that's encryption, and we saw that in China, Donald. VPNs were banned. People got in trouble with VPNs because VPNs would get around the Chinese firewall. People got in a lot of trouble in China over VPNs. So that's going to roll out here. I use VPNs. I use it not because I'm doing nefarious things, just simply because the information I'm using is private. It's business. This is what we use to connect business for remote workers is VPN. So even though it can be used to skirt around firewalls and censorship, it's mainly used for business communication. So that will have some impact. Ford also didn't show up yesterday for work. You mean like at work? He didn't show up at all? Oh my goodness. Yeah, Rob wouldn't be pleased. Rob is he wouldn't be pleased at all with what Doug's doing here. God bless Rob. Rob was quite the figure, but yeah. So okay, here we go. Enjoy the feed. We'll talk soon. All right. A bit of a long morning. We didn't have a break till now. Bit of a long morning. My fingers are tired. Lots of notes. This witness is amazing in that he is being very honest. And what's even more amazing is what he's saying. This is pretty crazy. Let me scroll up to the beginning of my notes here. There's a lot. I'll probably save Tom Curry for... I'll try to get to it all as quick as I can, but I may have to save some of it for after the after show. Wow. So there's a lot of, so Commission Counsel was asking a lot of questions, and a lot of the quotes we were getting out of this witness, Bernier, Inspector Bernier, were around planning. There's a whole lack of planning. Plan this, plan that, plans inside of plans, versions of plans, phases of plans, dates for plans. Oh my God. This is a lot about planning. The city mayor the city and the mayor were talking to protesters to move to Wellington. And you said you recommended the positive action to those outside of Wellington, correct? So where they're going here was they were talking about there was a plan to move the trucks around. I think south of Wellington or something like that. And he was saying, yeah, there was positive action going on outside of that area. Basically, everything was starting to come into the downtown. So they were pleased with the progress. And I believe that was on the 13th. He complained about integrated co-location not existing amongst them. And central planning doesn't exist. There we go again with the integrated command and the central planning. Maybe they're heading in that direction. We spoke about that a lot yesterday. It looks like every single commander created an integrated command table that they each set up. And, well, if you just go by the name, it's an integrated command table. So a bunch of commands being integrated for the purpose of, I guess, sharing plans and strategy and timelines and all that good stuff. But then he also showed some confusion. So there was a disconnect between the mayor's office, which was, I believe, the city manager, so Steve Kay, would have been working on this deal with the convoy organizers to move the trucks. And then when they noticed on the operational side with the OPS, they were confused. Things were moving. So his quote was, the mayor's agreement caused vehicles to move. And they didn't know why. So they didn't know if they didn't know why. And then if they leave, how do we keep them from occupying them again to reoccupy? So from their side, they were seeing strategically, operationally, that trucks were moving. Okay, and they didn't know why. They were not aware of this plan to have things move, and they kind of got all worried, and they're wondering if they're just moving things around, if there are going to be more people coming in and filling the gaps. I guess we can see how important it is to actually be communicating. The mayor's office was moving trucks, trying to end the protest peacefully, and the police operations had no idea about it, and then they were kind of spooked by the activity. That sounds funny, doesn't it? It sounds really funny. From the convoy perspective, they're doing everything they can to make agreements and progress and work with the city. And now police operations are getting spooked by the proper behavior they're doing? Come on, come on. And what were they spooked about? What did they think they were doing? They're replacing trucks with tanks. What were they worried about? Why don't you just observe and watch? If the city didn't tell you what's going on, you can also observe, watch, talk. Do you not have your PLTs around? Where are the PLU units? Shouldn't you know? Shouldn't you be talking to the truckers? Lots of, I think they decided to close down certain sources of information. Maybe it wasn't convenient. Maybe they didn't like what it said. But in either case, of course, they could have known what was going on. Then he talked about an egress plan to get the vehicles out of the downtown core. Just let a one-way work. Let one-way work. Block the incoming lane. Let one-way work. One way out. Okay, what are you talking about? You had to come up with an egress plan in order to keep the trucks from coming back or additional trucks coming in. Come on. You guys work events all the time. You know how to do a one-way clear out. It can happen easy. And when we were down to a few vehicles, how to hold it. So again, with the law, the war language. So when they were down to a few vehicles, they were worried about how do we hold that line and not let them come back in. Talking like a war. Hold it. These people drove away. What do you think? They're just going to go gas up and come back? Are you obviously not talking to them? He met on the 15th. There was a meeting on the 15th to move their command post and a wholesome conversation and a chance. Yeah. And a chance and change of direction. Okay, so you're on the 15th. So this is after the Emergency Act has been enacted. This is when the boots are coming down. This is where I kind of got annoyed with his testimony, because this is where he started to look like he was having a good time with all of this. He was having fun because he was using words like wholesome conversation. It's a wholesome conversation that you're about to go put the boots down on a bunch of people. He had smiles. He was doing some things at this time, which kind of let his personality come out. To him, this was kind of like a big game of Risk or something, where they were just playing. To them, it was playing. They weren't outside in the cold. They're not on horses with swords saying charge. They're inside, looking at screens, watching videos, having tea, having coffee, enjoying themselves while boots are being laid. So I didn't like how he was talking about this meeting being a wholesome conversation and a change in direction. Maybe, and at this time on the 15th, so it's after the EA has been put in place. Maybe we're not utilizing the resources properly. Maybe we should focus on the stabilization phase and communication, develop the plans. So at this point, they still don't have plans. He's admitting to it right now. They still don't have plans. This is the 15th now. They're still twiddling their thumbs. There's different versions of different things that are missing stuff all over the place. So he says they're still changing plans. There's new plans. They had no idea what they were doing because it was not a war. This is my commentary here. So they were falling apart in their planning because they were planning for war, and there was no war, and they were playing war. So when there was no war-like response, they were confused because, like, well, what do we do now? We got all this stuff, we got all this equipment, we got all these police, we're ready to combat, and there's no combat. So yeah, the confusion of war. You've heard that term before. It can happen. And certainly when you think you're in a war, you're just creating a situation. If this was a negotiation, a mediation, a de-escalation, a communication, none of this stuff happens. None of this stuff happens. Daily in courts, all of those things happen. Communication, mediation, issues are dealt with all the time. Complicated, big, small, well-used common law, etc. like that. It's just silly to think that they needed to escalate to a war level because they just wanted to have fun, it looks like. Then he talked about the Fed meeting plan on the 13th. It aligned with their plan. So on the 13th, before the Emergency Act, he was aware that the Feds had a plan in order to have a meeting set up at a later date, as long as the convoy would agree to denounce unlawful activity and leave. They would be getting a meeting. And he was talking about how that plan would align with their plan, which is to have people leave. So if that plan worked great for them. But when he was probed on it, he saw that there was challenges with it because it was a political agreement. And again, this is a police. He likes policing. If it happens and people leave, then it's a benefit to the operations. So the way he saw it was political, and if it happened, great. But he didn't really look at it as an option to do before they invoke the rest of their planning. He's talking about stuff missing in their plans. Well, maybe this is one. Preemptive step before we take it. Can we at least try this one from the federal government? See if they'll denounce it, see if they'll move the trucks. He just looked at it as something that maybe could have helped if they executed the plan separately, not integrated with his plan. Did the city or OPS operations inform you about this? No. So there was yet another plan, which was the city plan. So we're getting so many plans here. There's a federal plan that was a meeting that they could have had if they denounced and moved out. There was the city plan, which is similar, but you would get a meeting with the mayor, and they didn't have to do it denounce. They were just having to cooperate and open up some streets and move some trucks. So they had this cooperation with the city to move stuff around, which was great, and a meeting with the mayor. That's basically all they can offer from the city. On the federal level, it was a meeting with Prime Minister, we'll assume, but they had to denounce and they had to leave. So two different plans that were kind of bubbling in the background, two different types of terms. Both of them required cooperation from the convoy, and it appears that the convoy was working both plans. But this inspector was not aware of the operations plan from the city. So he got a no on that answer. He wasn't aware of it. And then he made a quote that the optics of the police negotiations with political partners could pose challenges to us. So what I'm getting annoyed with this whole optics thing. Optics for who? CBC? Optics for who? The people living in Toronto? Whose optics are you so worried about that it is causing you not to negotiate and work with political partners? So where he was going with that was it looks silly or looks bad if the police are negotiating directly with politicians. I don't even know why he would say that. I do understand that politicians should not have the power to direct the police. Okay, we all agree on that. There's no direction that should come from a counselor, stuff like that. We all agree with that. We heard testimony already. They wish they had that power. They don't. But why can't you have conversations about negotiating a plan? Hey, if you're going to do plan A, that will impact our plan. Let's see if yours works first. There's absolutely no reason why that would be an optics issue, unless you're trying to say this is why we don't talk, is because genuinely it's an optics issue. In either case, I think it's silly. It's very silly. That's not the way that communication should be happening. So I don't like hearing about the optics of things. So we also started getting into some good testimony around the EA. So there's a quote here: the EA did not significantly impact. The Baron did not know that the feds would be on the 13th. Oh, sorry. Mathieu did not know that the feds would be involved on the 13th. He was a police liaison from the OPP. We heard from him yesterday. And then he did not know the plan. So he confirmed that the OPP PLU, Mathieu, was not aware of the federal plan. And as we saw yesterday with the deer and headlights look from him, when he was informed by Brendan Miller that they did have his plan, here's confirmation again that he was left in the dark. He had no idea. Here's another witness, or the first witness since him, that said, yeah, he had no clue that that was happening. And now we know why he was so surprised when he found out yesterday that that happened. The feds did have his plan. There was a plan on the 13th. But he's admitted that, nope, he was not aware of it. So that's kind of shocking. Where's this communication they keep talking about? Integrated command. Wow. Maybe it's only integrated on when you think it's necessary, but not the whole time. Quote here: the plan I was developing was based on existing author from a previous federal and provincial levels. Oh, yes, right. So no, sorry. What he was doing here is his plan that he was working on only used existing authorities from the province, the federal, common law, act, municipal. He listed them out. This is what he was building. This is what he always builds. This is what takes place on a daily basis when we have to leverage them. The plan he was building and the advice was on getting the right people. He was satisfied that they had all the authority we need to take action. So this was on the 13th, his plan on the 13th, which ultimately still was the plan all the way through the 17th. They just added the EA to it. He was satisfied at that point that they had all the existing authorities that they need. Very important, because that's exactly what you can't have if you're going to pull out the EA. So he covered them all: common law, provincial, federal. He had several existing statutes, and he listed them. And then the question to him was, you are referring to existing authorities: municipal, common law, criminal code, highway traffic act. what's your view? Whether or not you had enough authority. And he said, I would agree. Even though we're using common law to establish a zone, the Emergency Act was a benefit. It provided a framework that was more understandable to members, community, protesters to understand when put in effect. So he's basically saying, because the EA was invoked, it was just really easy to point to the EA as the reason why you're pushing this out. And because it was legal and what they were doing was legal, there was no way to push them out in that fashion. They had to determine and declare them as illegal and label them in certain ways so that they can escalate it up into additional authorities. But I think that's one of the I think the swearing in of the RCMP for the EA was one of the silliest answers we've had so far. So this will be a close second, just to be able to communicate messaging clearer to people. And what he's saying here is the threats were stronger. That's what he's saying here. They had the ability to threaten stronger, lock you up, bank accounts, no jury, no judge right now. Just close your bank accounts, lock you up. The threats got stronger. That's what he's talking about when he says a benefit here. And then he was asked, was helpful? The quote was, anything that contributed to the operation was helpful. So again, there can't be an operational plan, something that's working for the EA to come in. It can't be an add-on, nice to have. It can't be the cherry on top or the gravy on the turkey. It has to be a last resort, no other options. And here he is saying it's just helpful. He used the word helpful. And this is why the questioner brought out helpful. He used the word helpful too, to get him to reemphasize why was it helpful. And then you were just flat out asked, was the EA necessary? And his answer was one of these, trying to be as careful as possible, but try and get the truth out. So he said, hard for me to say. I did not get it. I did not get to do the operation without it. I don't know what complications would have been when I used my common law. We have used it before and since without EA, and it was effective. I cannot say on this particular date. It's hard for me to say. So all he's saying there is I didn't have a chance to do my actions, my plans without the EA on this particular day. I have had plans before and after this event without the EA, and my plans worked. But he can't say whether or not it would have worked because he didn't have a chance to do it. That's a roundabout way of saying he didn't need the EA. He didn't need the EA because he's had events after, before, large ones, small ones, aggressive ones, peaceful ones. He's had them all. And why didn't you try it without it first? Why didn't you just try the plan? You could have still did the same thing on February 14th. Instead of doing the EA, you could just declare we are executing a police action, and here are the laws that give it to us, because he listed them all out. Here are the common laws, municipal, traffic, provincial. Here are all the laws that give us this effect, this authority. And I assure you, it would have the same effect. You could have announced that through your loudspeakers, say, the provincial emergency that's been declared here requires you to move under authorities A, B, C, D, and F. Have a good day. They could have done that. So the answer is saying I don't know if the EA would have been needed or not because I didn't have a chance to do it without it is a weird one. Okay, they're back. Here's your audio.
The commission is in recess for 1 hour. La commission levée pour 1 heure.
There we go. We got our lunch hour now. What'd you guys think? I really don't like when government of Canada does their questioning. They really do some weird questioning. They're really trying to paint a picture that didn't exist. But you know what? Maybe possibly the government's possibly trying to be possibly a good government to possibly help us, possibly get through the next possible phase of this possible country of ours. So many possibles. Potential now. Potential's making its way in there. Maybe they're just getting tired of saying possible. So now it's potential as well. Right, folks, I did line up some guests for this break, but the one guest got ill. Let me know politely that we're going to have to reschedule, and that's absolutely fine. You know, this is a show that's flexible. That's what we're here for. And another guest got a call from Chris. He's going to go get his microphone today. The microphone's being picked up today, and he's helping his family. So family first, always family first. So we're not going to be hearing from any guests, which will allow me, if you will indulge me, to go ahead and get through all my notes because there's a lot of them. And I think it's a good idea because then we can free up for the after show could be for the afternoon stuff. Oh, wow. 4 pages, 5 pages, 6 pages. Should I let you go and have a quick break? I don't get one, so neither do you. Let's do this. We're going to go back to the questioning from the Commission Council. We were making our way through those notes. We're about halfway through. And then we'll get into some excellent ones from Rebecca Jones, the lawyer. Oh, sorry, Tom Curry, the lawyer for Peter Slowly. And then we'll get into, for sure, Bathsheba from the convoy. They were great. And then if we got time, we'll get into the Government of Canada. There's not much to say there other than extreme disappointment as a Canadian. All right, so where we left off from the Commission Council questions was around whether or not the EA was necessary to make an exclusion zone. And by the way, the Government of Canada stepped on it. They didn't get the answer they're looking for concerning this question later. So we'll get to that. No, he was talking about common laws and other ways to set it up. And a zone was created under the existing laws if it was designated. So as soon as it was designated as unlawful protest or occupation or whatever that magic moment was, from that point on, there was definitely common law that would have applied, because the common law refers to it if it's been designated. So if it was been designated, then we can go ahead and do it. There's a lot of chat about where does this happen? Up till today, we didn't really know. We kind of, those of us in government and stuff like that did know who was going to do it. But it wasn't really talked about in this inquiry yet until about now. So when they were doing this question about the designation, immediately I'm looking for the how and the who created the designation for the protest to become an unlawful occupation. So we're hoping that he would spill the beans. And yeah, of course, Minister Marco, Public Safety, Mendicino. I'm horrible, you guys. I have a lisp. It's something I had to grow up with and work with. So there's certain words that are very difficult. I'll do my best. But Minister Marco, Public Safety, he was the one that would be the one that designated it. However, what we found out was he didn't. He said it was unnecessary to designate from the minister. The minister didn't designate it. That's interesting, because that is the legal, what it appears to be is a legal mechanism and the trigger that once the Minister of Public Safety designates it as a unlawful occupation, then that's now officially designated, and then other common laws and emergency provisions of the province and municipality can start kicking in. Why didn't he? Okay, so I found that very interesting. When given the opportunity just before the EA, the Minister Marco had the opportunity to sign a piece of paper that would have officially allowed them to implement a bunch of other tools available to them under common law, but it was not done. So I found that very interesting that they decided not to take the proper action. Some of us know why. The rest of you are still learning. As it's coming out, you're going to understand a little bit more that they got exactly what they wanted. Every single event happened the way they wanted to, including invoking the Emergency Act when it was unnecessary. So you're going to learn that later. But yeah, here we are. The Minister of Public Safety, Mr. Marco, did not declare it. Yeah, called it unnecessary. So now they were talking a lot about stabilizing the operation. And then they made the statement that he made a statement, there's no more talking, you have to leave, it's over. So these were the messaging he was giving to the protesters after the Emergency Act. That's the big boot, right? That's the big boot. No more talking, no more conversation, it's over, time to go. Persuade me, don't force me is where I'd like to live, and that's force. We certainly heard this, and it's really annoying to me when anybody says things like biological, chemicals, nuclear explosions, children, risks in vehicles of unknown devices. We thought people would barricade themselves in vehicles. You don't even have one remote minor incident on that. I think the only thing I really saw was one trucker or two truckers inside of a truck where the police broke the window and dragged them out. But I don't think you can call that barricading. Okay, you just had to break the window and that was it. And one RV where there was a family in there, they destroyed the front door and pulled it open. But they came out and there was no problem. When you hear barricade, you think of armed, you think of resistance, you think of active involvement by the person who's barricaded. That's not what happened. It was just not compliant. It doesn't want to leave. I don't call that barricading. But here they're painting that picture. And this is what we were going to go with the EA and go until it was fully cleared. Yeah, he was making an announcement that you're just going to move with the EA, use it all the way to the end. And once cleared, they'll go into the maintenance stage to keep it cleared. And once satisfied, they were not returning, and then they were satisfied, it would be a return to normalcy. That's not what the EA is for. The EA is not for making it easier, faster, and return to normalcy. We've heard about 2 plans in place that would have done that. One plan with the city to meet with the mayor, move some trucks around, and another plan with the federal government to meet with the federal government if they left and decried, said it was unlawful and said they won't do it anymore. Then it got to the point of using of horses and batons. So the question came up about using them and whether or not it was appropriate. And his answer was silly. I didn't like it. He said, yep, the one you're referring to was someone. Okay, so what they were talking about was on the 18th. This is several days after the EA. And this is when we saw the horse and the lines and all this kind of stuff being pushed on the protesters. What he was talking about was he saw that the presence was increasing on his day. I guess trying to tell the commissioner, like, look, it wasn't working on the 17th. On the 18th, where the crowd's getting bigger and they're getting more agitated and stuff. I want to tell you all the truth. They were being surrounded. The protesters were being surrounded by all areas and being pushed in that direction. So what they're calling an increase in this area is the protesters moving from another area by direction by the police. So what you're actually speaking of are people who are complying with the requirement to move, and they were corralling them. They were corralling them into one area to make the footprint smaller and smaller. So it's disingenuous to imply that the crowd was getting bigger when it wasn't. You already had a barrier around. People couldn't get to the area easily. You were just corralling people into a smaller and smaller area and then calling it a bigger group. We see through that there, Inspector. And that's not a very cool thing to do. And then they were calling them more volatile. Well, yeah, you're corralling them, you're grouping them and hitting them and beating them and snatch and grabbing. And by the way, we'll get to that snatch and grab in a bit. That was ridiculous. For a person with intelligence, he knew he was playing games around the wording there. And then they had to increase the force. So his answer to using the horses and baton was the crowd's getting bigger, it's getting more agitated, and it's getting more volatile. Well, yeah, you're pushing everybody into one area, you're cornering them, and you're beating them. You're creating the situation that you say you need more force for. That will be a cycle, won't it? You put more force, you're going to be more resistance, more force, more resistance. Only the one with the biggest butt of a gun is going to win that one. And there were no guns on the protester side, no matter how many times they bring up the possibility. If there was, we would hear about it. It would be all over the place. We would see the gun. We would know the face of the person carrying it. Never happened. And by the way, none of the convoy organizers or participants brought any of that for the very reason that even a single little water gun would have caused a problem. So they didn't. And they don't need to. What do they need guns for? This is Canada. And it's heartbreaking to listen for me. These were Canadians with legit grievances, and they wanted their voice to be heard, but they're talking about them as combated resistance, have to be taken down, put down, boot down. And by the way, if you really listen closely to that portion of the testimony, that is what totalitarianism sounds like. That's what a government who will just do whatever they want sounds like. So if you listen very closely, all they're talking about is responding to what they believe to be the situation as harshly as they can. And they didn't care about talking. They didn't care about negotiating or communicating. That's what it sounds like, everybody. So if you don't like the sound of that, if that made you upset, it bothered you, understandably so. It bothered me a lot. And this is when he did his giggle. This is where his actual mindset, his actual personality popped out. He did a giggle when asked the question around how well the coordination of the command was. And he giggled because it was a mess. We need a functional command team is where he went with that. That giggle isn't, not only is it inappropriate, his mindset at it was a game. They were playing. And one of his problems was command was disorganized. So when that was brought up again, was it functional? Of course, his response is negative giggle. Nothing funny, Inspector. Nothing funny at all here. What happened during the night? Yeah, so on the 17th, the announcement went out. They started doing some activities, but police get tired, they go to sleep. So what happened when it went to sleep? When they went to sleep, and he said nothing. It was held. There were no incursions, no issues. So can we just step back for a second here at this point? So the night of the 17th, the Emergency Act is still in effect. It's in effect because Canada can't survive without it. It's the end of our democracy. It's the end of our government at any moment. But there's time to go to sleep. There's time to pause. There's time to kind of just hold the line. And why? Well, it's not a real war. How many wars do you think they have when they all agree to just go to sleep? You were pushing peaceful people. You were being very aggressive towards Canadians who were not fighting back, and you just made a line. I remember the videos. You were setting up fences at night so that people didn't do anything, and they didn't. And then I remember the video in the morning because there was a lot of streamers walking around, empty streets, not much going on. And then at 9 o'clock, you guys started up again, kind of like it was a show, kind of like you had to keep this thing going. That's not the situation that the Emergency Act was designed for. At no point did the EA think that the danger that you're going to be fighting is possible. It goes to sleep. You guys can rest and relax, recharge, and start at 0900. I think that testimony alone right there just showed how the EA was not necessary. It was overblown, the situation, and that was definite overreach. Because if it was a situation that was so critical, the city was coming to a break, it was the end of the world, the coup, the government was scared, that lone knife that they spoke about was going to be used. You don't go to sleep. You keep fighting until the issues are resolved. So I found that telling, very telling, that they had a start time on the 18th of 0900 hours. And then at this point, he's calling them protesters. So he stopped calling them anything else at this point. He actually started referring to them again as protesters. So this is on the 18th. So he said the protesters then started back up. So, he's falling in between the protester and the occupiers. He's having, in his own mind, difficulty keeping it straight in his own mind too. So this was weird. The question was, were tools like smoke grenades used against the protesters? And his response was, the protesters were making their own smoke. So the question was, were smoke grenades being used? And the answer was, the protesters were creating smoke. The only smoke I can think they're talking about would be the breath because it's cold, and maybe fires from burn barrels. So what smoke is he talking about? Not getting the right answer, the council tried again and said, was there any need by the police to use smoke grenades? And then he had to confess. He had to say, yes, there were some. He knew full well when the question was asked, smoke grenades used, he knew full well who has them and that they were used. What a deflection of an answer there. And what smoke are you talking about? Tobacco, cannabis, air from the breath? What smoke are you talking about? The protesters most certainly were not shooting smoke grenades to you. You guys would have opened fire if something like that happened. No, I have no idea what you're talking about. The only time I think that you can legitimately say that a protester threw a smoke grenade at the police would have been to return it back to them. It's their property. They threw it at you. You can return it back to them. That's a very Canadian thing to do. Those are the end of my notes for the Commission Council. So I'm going to jump over to the chat and see if I need to catch up there. Oh, wow. You guys are great. So Wayne, the little I heard was some pulses and it's actually changed. I lost you there, Wayne. The little I heard was some pulses and actually changed. Made me feel so uncomfortable. Maybe you can clarify there, Wayne. There's another chat from you, so I'll see. Miss Wilson Morgan, so please share. Yep. I'm going to share away, Connie. There's a whole bunch. So, I hope you're enjoying. That was just a Commission Council summary. I'll get to the rest. There's some really good ones coming up. Hey, Wayne, but obviously if you leave a conversation, the government rep actually do become relaxed. You hear more introduction of damning video. Yeah, for sure, Wayne. We saw one. That's our first video. And I'll get to that comment because, again, this witness is very careful about what they're saying, because I don't think they want to be impeached. So far, I don't think he's been impeached. But one tactic for a witness who's trained and understands how to answer questions the way they want to do, is to make a big deal and pretend like you're not sure and pretend like you're seeing something different. We saw that in a couple places coming up where he pretended like, I don't really see that, or what gun are you talking about, when they're they're right there. As far as I know, but I don't know staggering. And I see you again. As far as I can tell, there were no declaration of illegality on paper at all before the emergency. Yeah, that's what we're hearing, right? Because we're hearing that Marco should have signed something. Somebody had to technically make it a declaration. It's not up to the front line or the ground to determine anything. It would have to go up, and a determination would have to happen somewhere. So that's what I was waiting for on that testimony, and we didn't get the answer. It appears nobody did that. So every single thing you've done, it's on a peaceful protest, because you didn't even declare it as anything but. Yes, exactly. Yeah, Prairie, you're on top of this. You're getting it. It's bad. I think we're well past the point of whether or not the government will succeed on this inquiry and establish it. I think we're well past that foundation is not happening. I think what we're going to be seeing for the next, after the convoy organizers next week, the other weeks after that, it's just going to be finger pointing, privy information, security information, intelligence, and of course, we're going to conclude with Trudeau himself saying, "Not my fault. Everybody else told me things." And then Freeland trying to paint a bigger picture to get him out of trouble about the global impact that they were worried about, which again never existed. The Globe was actually proud of Canada. You talk to real people; they were proud of Canada. So had we succeeded and finished, it would have been a good thing for Canada, not a bad. But at least we heard relevant answers. We sure did, Wayne. Yep. So this witness, I think he was the best OPS witness when it comes to truth. The other ones, I think, were a lot worse when it came to truth. I think they definitely skirted, touched, toe over, and crossed the truth line a couple times, at least. This one came close, touched, and then word salad his way out of a few of them. But I don't think he's been dishonest yet, but he's definitely been very uncomfortable today. The video is a prime example. He didn't see anything as harmful. Yeah, like, is that really his mindset? He's watching somebody get beat, and he's like, I don't see any problem. Is that really his mindset? I don't see any problem. But you'll look at a report about a guy with a knife on his back that was never used, and you're going to lose your mind. You're going to be super scared for the children and residents of the city. But an officer beating somebody with a gun, that's fine, right? And it wasn't even the butt end, right? It was the danger end. It was the end with all the action. Anything can happen, a little slip of a finger, and that becomes far more dangerous for everybody. All right, so let me jump over to the other. Oh, something just popped in there. Wayne. Baseball bat, automatic weapons. If they're corked, maybe. If they're corked, maybe. I don't know. I don't know if there was claimed of baseball bats, but this is Canada, so it'll most likely be hockey sticks. And it would have been a bunch maybe playing hockey, but we're not even hearing that. We're not even hearing that they're armed with hockey sticks and goalie pads and face masks, and they're ready to go crazy. That could have been a real Canadian thing to do if we were trying to advance the line, but we weren't trying to advance. We were trying to hold the line and get the message heard, and yeah, we got pushed around. In the video, you saw one. You're maybe talking about the batons as well. Automatic weapons for the police. I thought it was interesting. I'll get to in a bit with the convoy questions, but he was playing dumb at one point. All of a sudden, he didn't know what a .572 caliber blah 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 looked like. But when pushed, he goes, "Oh yeah, that's it. That's probably serial number 5874." That's how well he knew those weapons, but pretended like he didn't. All right, Wayne, I'm going to jump over back to my comments or my notes. If there's more comments, go ahead and throw them in. I'll go for the next batch. Tom Curry, lawyer for Peter Slowly. Yeah, he was mad, and he was going for the jugular. He is protecting Slowly, and this particular witness obviously was an adversary to Slowly. We heard about that before. We even heard from Tom Curry that there was liaisons involved between Slowly and this inspector, this commander, whatever you want to call him. Oh, by the way, I asked a question if anybody knows about his service badge, his service bars. I do know that those are related to a whole bunch of things, including campaigns or missions that you're involved in. So I'm curious if the convoy clearing has a campaign, and if there's bars, and if there are, is he wearing them, and who else is wearing them? Because it'd be showing their pride to be a part of a mission. So I'm curious if anybody knows if those service bars that he's wearing has anything related to the Freedom Convoy in it. And if you know how to read those, let me know what is on there, because he's wearing one. So he definitely has some accomplishments when it comes to some sort of missions. So it'll be interesting to see what those meant, and if there is a convoy related one that these officers are now wearing with pride. I'd like to know what it is, because then maybe we can mock it to the point where they just stop it. We'll take the colors and use it for something else. All right, so back to Tom Curry, lawyer for Peter Slowly. He came out swinging big time. He was not taking prisoners because it looked like there was such a big disconnect between Slowly and the command structure, the integrated command structure, that this will probably be why Slowly was frustrated, not making headway, and eventually used as a scapegoat and fired when people were not happy with things. So the first thing Tom was trying to establish was, what's the chain of command? What is the true chain of command? So he identified that the command structure ends at the chief. And the witness said, yep, yes, the command ends at the chief. All right. Went ahead and Tom said, all roads lead to the chief. Or in the case of the OPP, a commissioner. Commissioner, correct? Yes. Autonomy, get used to this word now. So autonomy comes up a lot in this segment of the testimony. Just a quick thing, autonomy simply means independence. You have the ability to make your own decisions. This is something we're all fighting for. Autonomy for our health, autonomy for our body, autonomy for our property, autonomy for ourselves. These are all things that we are always fighting for. And they're using this in the same context within here, which, as Tom was pointing out, that autonomy exists, but ultimately it's the chief who makes a decision. And the witness answer was autonomy. They have the authority to do things that they need to do. Some things they don't have the authority, and they need the command. And he was favoring autonomy over the command structure because he wanted to make sure that the teams had enough decision-making to do what they needed to do. Basically, what that's saying is, look, we have a bunch of units. They should be able to function. You don't need to ask for permission to go to the bathroom. You don't need to ask permission to use a different pen, that kind of stuff. You can make some decisions on your own. But when it's important ones, for example, change in plan or asking for more resources or reallocating resources and stuff like that, there may be a requirement to have it approved. But as we hear in a little bit later, coming up with Tom here, it looked like they were just being islands and being the big chiefs and being commanders themselves. They were kind of giving themselves some grand power and ignoring the actual structure, as we'll hear soon here. Now, Tom brought up, it's not meant to mean that you are completely autonomous and the chief still remains responsible. So even though you're running autonomously, the responsibility, accountability still is going to lie with the chief. So you're making decisions, you have all this power, but you're not really fully responsible. That's the chief. That's why the chief is still the one that needs to make the final decision. It's them who's on the line. And then this witness says that is correct. So he wants to have the power to do whatever he wants, but not the responsibility and accountability. So he's fine with the chief still having that part of it, but not the rest. And I think Tom Curry did a good job there of establishing that there was some sort of breakdown in the command structure. And this is likely going to be something they talk about later on Friday with Peter himself, Slowly himself, on did you have command? Did you have control? And then what happened? So one of these answers, okay, so this answer coming up is really sad. I didn't like it at all because Tom asked or stated, it is not wrong for the chief to interact with a commander, because there was a lot of talk about there's a certain way of doing things. But what Tom was trying to say is that the chief can talk to whoever he wants, and he has the final say. There shouldn't be any barriers to the chief for any subordinate staff or anybody they're working with. But the answer was that interaction is quite limited because the commander would manage the chief's concerns. They're talking about the liaison commander here. So there's a liaison commander that would manage the chief's concerns. They're handling the chief here. So if the chief has a concern, what do you mean a concern? He's a chief. He should be able to just say something. They were managing his concern through a process here. The avenue, he called it, the proper avenue. It would be an avenue. In this case, Ferguson. So Ferguson, what we heard from her before. So she was the liaison between this witness's commander and the chief. And it is just, and then he mentioned that without Ferguson, without the liaison, he limited the communications down to just saying hi and that type of thing. If there's a particular need for the chief to communicate, he said in his words that there's a particular avenue for the chief in the proper chain. Who is this guy? He's a commander and he's telling the chief, his boss, how he's supposed to communicate to him. It sounds like there was an HR issue here. It sounds like there's a personality issue here. And it sounds like because of HR and a lot of employment rights and contract rights and a bunch of things, this sounds like a subordinate who's out of control. And the only way to make this situation kind of work, and given the situation they were in and the time they had and the people they had, was to establish Ferguson as a liaison to keep things moving at least somewhat. It sounds to me like this witness should have been fired quite some time ago. He's got way too much power in his head, and he was making things difficult for the chief himself to do work. And this is what I think Tom was trying to get out of him, and I think he was successful there. Once again, Tom reemphasizes it's not wrong for the chief to communicate. It includes a responsibility to set command. True? And he said true. Yeah, he does agree and he does understand that the chief is the top of the command, but yet he's setting up particular avenues and proper chains for him to voice his concerns, is the way he said it. Instead of having a way to have his orders applied, it's voicing his concern. You can see the mindset of some of these people here. They have no respect for authorities. So if they have no respect for authorities other than themselves, what respect are they going to have for the people? Right? And then they went into the whole lessons learned after the event. This is going to be a common theme. We're going to hear this a lot. After things are a hot seat for a while, after it's uncomfortable for a while, one good tactic for a lawyer is to turn down the heat a little bit for a bit. Kind of trying to reestablish that, look, I'm not always going to be a tough guy on you. I can sometimes be all right with this. So sometimes we'll turn it down and then turn it right back up. Okay, catch you off guard. But he did snap back at the witness here because he said he was smiling. So at this point, commander, inspector, whatever you want to call this guy, he was smiling. He was smiling. And so Tom called him out. He says, "You're smiling." And this is when the questions were around not working well with slowly. And then I think that's why Tom called him out of it, because in this witness's mind, he was going through and replaying the whole, I didn't have to talk so slowly. I set up this avenue. There's a proper chain of command. I am actually making things the way I want it. And then when you hear Slowly's representative say, it was not working well, like you're not communicating with Slowly, he giggles, he smiles. On his face, he smiled because he's very proud that he was able to establish, in my opinion, he was very proud he was able to establish a circumvention to the chief's orders and the chief's command. That's what it sounds like to me, and he was proud, so he was smiling about it. Tom picked up on that. He didn't like it, so he called him out on it. And then at this point, he says, we need an org chart to establish clear control. What do you mean? Chiefs in command. What do you mean? What do you mean you need a org chart to establish? When you were hired, you were put into a role. You have the org chart. What do you mean? What he means here is he wanted to change the org chart in order to facilitate and be closer to what he wanted. There was an org chart. They did have a chain of command, but he didn't like it because maybe it's not enough command for him. But what it looked like that he was trying to establish as the ultimate command was the multiple commanders working together. We get to this a little bit later, where he puts that forward as the ultimate command, not the chief. We also heard that from the 3rd to the 8th, he had no interactions with Chief Slowly. And he said maybe some Teams, but not much. So Teams would be the video conferencing software they use. So he's saying maybe he saw him on Teams or something, but not much. He didn't like Slowly. I don't know what Slowly's take on it is, because we haven't heard any testimony from him. But from this witness, from his testimony, from the way he talks, he didn't like Slowly. He didn't want to work with Slowly. He didn't even respect Slowly. Even later, when Tom said Slowly respected you, he really thought highly of you, you saw an interesting emotional response from this witness. Kind of surprised, kind of pleased, kind of happy, and a little bit maybe, oh, maybe I misread this guy because I didn't think he liked me. Maybe some of that was bounced around his head. But when Tom said, Slowly liked you, he respected you, he thought high of you, he had an interesting response to that. Kind of like he didn't think that was possible. And anyways, I found that interesting. He did have an emotional response there. I actually thought he was going to well up a bit. But no, he composed himself. Then they got into the evolution of plans. You thought there were different plans. So he talked about different plans being not the same. But what Tom showed here were they were just different versions of the plan. It was the evolution of the plan. There was really only one OPS plan. It just evolved up to like 3.0. So you can assume there was maybe a draft, 1.0, 2.0, 3.0. So possibly even 4 versions of this thing by the time they got there. But this witness was saying he thought there were multiple different plans. When he was pushed, though, he did have to admit that some elements are the same. So he said, yeah, the elements were the same. So that's all a plan is. A plan is a collection of elements that are thought out, organized. And if all the elements are the same, slightly different wording, slightly different ordering, it's the same plan. This is where Tom was going with it. It was just an evolution. And then he kind of cornered this witness because his witness was talking about how long it could take to make a plan, but he inherited a plan on the 9th that already existed. So on the 9th, he got the plan, but what Tom was trying to establish here is, hey, look, yeah, I get it takes time, but you were given a plan. It was already done. Sure, you can have some modifications and edits to it, but you're not creating one from scratch. You were given one. And his response to that was, I was not privy to the conversation, but I would expect that the team would use the existing elements to create a plan. So here we're back to this whole plan and elements, and he's basically saying the plan that he got on the 9th, he assumes it would have been a plan that had all the elements up to that point, and it handed it to him. But he wasn't part of it, so he doesn't know. This is another one of those avoidances, because of course he knows. He knows what the plan is. The one from the 9th, we'll see later, morphed on the 12th and the 13th and the 17th. He was fully aware of the plan. Saying he wasn't in the conversation at the meeting to create the plan is one way to try and distance yourself from the plan, but that wasn't really the question. It's like you received one on the 9th. It was an existing plan. You just built up on it. So his answer to avoid saying, yeah, I received a plan that had a bunch of stuff in it. His way to avoid was saying, I wasn't in that meeting, but that wasn't the question. And he does this a few times. And then he says his plan would normally take a month. And then he says it would have been nice to have a month. There we go again with the empathy for the protesters, the humans outside, February cold. Yeah, here we go. It would have been nice if you had some extra time. Yeah, I get it. They're not being very empathetic and understanding of the humanity portion of this. On the 10th, you had a final plan. So on the 9th, he was given substantially completed plan. On the 10th, he had a final plan that you took from the 10th to the 17th. So Tom is showing here that on the 10th, you basically had your final plan that you used all the way through the 17th. That's a full week, right? And he said, then he went into this little taking everybody down a memory lane for him. And I thought this was silly because the question from Tom was, you knew from the 10th to the 17th what the plan was and you were fine with it. But his answer was, well, on the 10th, I slept. All right, so we're going to take the 10th off for there. So from the 11th to the 12th. On the 11th, as I understand, I was starting to learn it and look at it. And then on the 12th, I was building my team. And by the 13th, we would be in that plan building mode. So he took the 10th, the 11th, and the 12th, scrapped it as just getting ready to look at the plan and keep building on it. So he used 3 days up there. And then he says on the 13th is when he actually started to review and expand on the plan. I don't know if this is over a weekend or not. I maybe look, but when there's a crisis and the city is under siege, there is no such thing as a weekend. So everybody's working all the time. Because if it really is a siege, that's exactly how you respond to it. Then we went back to the plan on the 9th did not involve you. So he wasn't even part of the planning, and he already said that. So he reaffirmed, correct, he was not part of that. And it would have taken, and then Tom's trying to establish here that even though you weren't part of the plan on the 9th, it itself took time to do. So the witness says, I would agree. And you were not involved in the writing of that plan, right? And he says he knew that the group got together to write the plan, but he wasn't part of it. I think what Tom was establishing here was plenty of effort already went into it. This witness didn't need an additional month to finish up a plan, because he said he wished he had another month or had a month, because that's how long it normally takes to make a plan from scratch. But he wasn't starting from scratch. And this is what Tom was trying to establish. You weren't starting from scratch. You had some time. And you also knew about it, and you knew it was coming. And then we got into another one of those redefining what words mean. So this time it was the word approval. How many people here knew that approval meant more than one thing, especially when it comes to plans and authority? So what he says approval means at this stage is just means reviewed. Simply means reviewed. And they're not using the legal term of approval. And this witness says yes. So whenever they're saying this plan was approved, what they're trying to establish here is it doesn't mean legally approved, like, yes, we say we can do this. What they're saying is I've seen it and read it. All right. The actual term they should be using then would be reviewed. Okay. It's reviewed. You can review something. It'll have a date, time, reviewed on, reviewed by. Approval is approval. Approval means I approve, I accept, I'm okay with this plan. So I think they're doing some word salad here, trying to mix things up so that approval doesn't mean approval. Violence doesn't mean violence, right? We've seen some of that. And then he was asked, did slowly approve? First, he said, not that I'm aware of. And are we talking about review, approve? What we're talking about here is approve. So the real definition of approve. So Tom was trying to establish that on the 9th, slowly approved the plan. But this witness says, not that I'm aware of. So Tom had to take him to an email, one of Slowly's emails, asking everybody, including him, because he was part of the integrated command, to get their approvals on it, because he's approved it. So on the 9th, there was an email that went out to all the others for their approvals, or reviews, or whatever they want to call it, on the document. But this witness did say that he wasn't aware of it. Now, he didn't say no. Okay. This is where you're skirting and being careful and cautious. He didn't say no. He answered in a way that allowed him to not remember. So not that I'm aware of is good enough to not commit you to a no. This is why the email had to come out and then show him. Well, unless you didn't read the email, here's your notification that the plan was approved by Slowly on the 9th. One line that I saw in the plan that bothered me, so I pulled it out, was needs expressed by our integrated partners. So instead of saying, Justin doesn't like this and Justin has concerns, they will use fancy little terminology like integrated partners. That just simply means feds, CSIS, RCMP, PPS, all these other organizations that believe that they have some sort of say or interest in what's going on. So they become an integrated partner. And what we didn't see on that list was needs expressed by protesters. Right? They don't care. Slowly acted in good faith and for the best of the OPS. So being Slowly's representative, he's going to be working hard to see that Slowly is represented well. And their position was Slowly was always working in good faith and doing the best for OPS. This witness said, I would say yes. Here we go with the Hendon reports. Got introduced to Hendon reports. I missed the date. I think they said the 27th was the first time you saw it. So that would be January 27th. But it could have been the 23rd. But I missed that date. I think it was 27th. Which he hadn't been introduced to previously, correct? And he says, correct. So OPP have been doing these reports for like 2 years. We know that Bell was on the list. We know several OPS people were on the list to receive them as they were coming in all the time. So a couple of years before this event, they were being circulated and passed out. Very odd that somebody of this command, responsibility, wasn't getting that information. And it did seem like this particular witness didn't care really about the intelligence. Not in that they didn't care that it was any good or anything like that. They just ignored that whole function and left it to somebody else. Somebody else was going to give him intel. He never questioned it. He just moved on it. That was the intel. That was their gospel. That's exactly what they worked with. And he didn't even have to see the sources like Hendon or anything else. He just took it for what it was. But what he didn't do, and that came up next, was he did not express any concerns to anybody. So what he does have in front of him, he didn't express any concerns. However, he did say it would have been verbal. Really? Chain of command, documents, approvals, phase 2.1, version 3.0, and you're doing your concerns, you're raising your concerns only verbal. No, this is what we were trying to establish with another witness too. If you had problems with this, why didn't you say anything? And the answer is, well, they didn't have a problem with it. They were actually just rolling along with it. He wanted to imply that maybe he did, and he would have verbalized it. I don't believe him. Then it was bizarre that there was a disconnect between OPS and what you thought was coming. So now there was some sort of friction between, it looks like Bell. We'll find out later, between Bell's plan and the plan that this witness was working on. There was a disconnect between them. And they were not accurate, and that there was a disconnect. So Tom was really trying to show here there was two plans, and you guys weren't even on the same page. But there was a disconnect. It looked like Bell had a different plan and didn't like the plan and something like that. There it is. Yeah. So you are not critical of the Bell team. Okay. So the question kind of came out weird. So I'm going to try and rephrase it. So the Bell team had the exact same information. So the intel was the same between Bell's team and this witness's team. But Bell had a much different plan. And the question was whether or not, or why, or were you critical of Bell's plan, because it was different than yours. Again, some more word salad and jumbling and deflection going on here, because he says the disconnect is the level of engagement on this magnitude. We don't have the plan out yet. On the 27th, that we were going to be a date for 2 days, but some are going to stay. They ramped up the intelligence across the province and nation level on how things seem to be happening in Ottawa. All right, so what he's saying here is on the 27th, he was getting different information. He thought the information he was receiving said it was going to be a 2-day event. And we've heard this from the OPS. They were circulating information that said they thought it would be only a 2-day event. But he felt that some of them were going to stay. So in his mind, yeah, some will leave, but some are going to stay. And that's also when he saw a ramping up of the intelligence from the province. So probably the Hayden reports at this time, because this is the 27th. So this might be the Hendon reports, because this might be when he did first see it on the 27th. And then the national level on how things seem to be happening in Ottawa. So now we know the provincial level had the Hayden reports. What was coming from the feds? So here he's indicated that he was receiving stuff on the 27th from the province and the feds. We haven't heard much about what packages the feds were providing and what kind of information or intelligence they were providing. But this is a hint at the fact that they were providing it. So this witness was receiving from provincial and national levels at this time about what was happening in Ottawa. Do you think the national one was more the narrative? The racist, the white supremacist, the violent, the fringe, right? Is that what the information he was getting from the Fed? OPP would have contradicted that. Did you think that the OPS had missed the mark before you went away? Yeah, so this dude went away for skiing. He came up. It was kind of embarrassing. I think what happened here, because we've heard some testimony, tensions were high. People were frustrated. The relationship with Slowly was not good. He was not aligned with Bell either on the plan. So it probably was one of those, why don't you take a break type of situations. Could have been to get the squeaky wheel away, because maybe he was being a bit of a squeaky wheel. I don't know the motivations why, but it doesn't seem like a good time to go skiing. The city's under siege, coup's coming, MOU says we're going to replace the government. It doesn't matter if you're just 45 minutes away there, bud. That's a bad time to go. There's optics. Okay, now you're talking about optics earlier. There's optics. One of the commanders of the event structure, of the command structure, is going to go skiing for a couple days. I think something's up there. I think it was he was getting frustrated. Maybe people are getting frustrated with him. There's already a disconnect between Slowly and him. So maybe he was asked to go take a break for a bit. It happens. People do get frustrated, and maybe the break helped him, but he was away. And then he testified that he was not privy to all the information in the plan, not only the Hendon reports, but many other sources. And all teams were engaged. The right people were in the right sections. Yeah, here he is just basically saying, I didn't care about the intelligence. The right people had the intelligence. I wasn't privy to it. This is somebody that just follows orders. That's what it looks like. Not even interested in the intelligence at all. He doesn't even consume it. He just follows it. I had to leave it at that. Yeah, so here's one of those surrendering power positions where they like to have power, but this is the not my job answer. He had to just leave it at that. He knew the intelligence was coming from many places, but they were going to the right people, and it was coming out as a clean little report that he just followed. And he had to leave it at that. So he didn't have an interest in even challenging it at all. You would not have gone away. So here's what Tom was trying to establish here, that he was so pleased with what he saw at this point that he was comfortable to leave for skiing. Tom was trying to make the point that if you didn't like what was going on, you would have stuck around and worked and fixed it, but you must have liked it because you weren't concerned. You were so unconcerned that you went for a break. And then that's when he started saying, I was not far, 45 minutes away. Well, what are you trying to say here? Are you trying to say you didn't like the plan, and if you needed to, you come back? Are you agreeing with this? What ended up happening was he pushed it a little bit more and said, well, you didn't record in writing that you thought the plan was inadequate. You deferred to their judgment. So Tom was saying here, well, you didn't write anything down and said you didn't like it. You went away on a skiing trip. You didn't seem to be concerned that it was a bad plan. And you were just deferring it to their judgment. And his response was, yes. So exactly what we thought, because it's basically what he was saying. This guy doesn't even look into it. He just follows what he's got. And he's so relaxed with all the information he's getting in the plan that he can go for ski. Relaxation is important. People deserve it. But the city was under siege, right? If you ask the mayor, this was the end of the world. Slowly said he may not be the only, or there may not only be a policing solution. So here we go again with the other solutions in policing. Slowly was always an advocate for trying to find other solutions than policing. That OPS alone. So there was some back and forth here because Slowly said you didn't have to do policing solution, but the witness was really adamant that policing solution was available. But what Tom was trying to establish was, well, without the additional partners, OPS itself alone wouldn't have been able to do a policing solution. And the response was, it was a policing solution. So he didn't even address the question. Then Tom went into the fact that 2 levels of government had declared an emergency. So that would be the municipal and the provincial at this time. So there were 2 declarations of emergency, provincial and municipal. The third one is the one we're here for today. And Tom said those are not policing solutions. Declaring emergency is not a policing solution. But this witness didn't agree with that. So he said, no, they are policing solutions. They're policing tools, just like the criminal code is and other statutes and laws. The EA or emergency acts of any level. To him, there are also tools that were put in place to assist police in certain ways. I agree with that. And glad he admitted that. I'm glad that he admitted that the municipal and the provincial emergency declaration was a tool for policing they could have used. Thank you. That's what we're here for. You confirmed it. And then he starts talking about the government of Canada had arranged a meeting, whether or not he knew about it. The government of Canada arranged to have a meeting with the convoy organizers if they decried the violence and left, agreed to leave. They would get a meeting later. And his response was he was informed. He did speak to that early in the testimony. He had knowledge by the OPP. The OPP were coordinating with him. And he informed that the province and the Fed... Okay, and he was informed that at the province and federal levels, ministers were drafting letters, and that if they denounced... Oh, right. Drafting letters that if they denounced the unlawfulness and leave, they would have a meeting at a later date. So he's well aware of the federal deal. Okay, well aware of the federal deal. May not have been aware of the city deal. He testified to not knowing that, but well aware of the federal deal. And that's also when Tom asked, well, that federal agreement, that's not a policing solution, is it? And he said, no, that's not a policing solution. So Tom established correctly that there were alternative solutions to just policing solutions. And one of them was the deal with the Prime Minister himself. Okay, so that's the end of my notes for Tom Curry. Great job defending slowly there. I think he pulled out everything he was looking for, and he's actually a really good lawyer. I do like him so far. Okay, now let's just jump to the comments. Oh wow, you guys are great. I think we're here. Where are we at? Baseball bat. No, we had this one. We had this one. Here we go. Denise, my friends from California, were worried about us. Wow. Yeah. Look, people in California feel bad for us. Jeez. Oh, this is what international reputation is. This is what they say they're trying to protect us from, and this is what we needed to do. Yeah, they're doing it themselves. Yeah. Sorry, Chinata. Whatever. I'm not sure, that whole relation works yet. But we're heading in that direction, aren't we? A baton, probably. Yeah, there's a whole bunch of them. Only on one side, though. Hey, James, I get the impression that the government and commission are no longer trying to establish a reason and are actively painting the recommendation part of this. Yeah, no, I think so too. And I think, James, I think you nailed it. I think the whole purpose right now from the government's perspective, and it looks like there's some collaboration even from the OPP, is that a new central command, central intelligence, central, something's going to be coming down. And I think that's what they're pushing for in these recommendations, because we keep hearing them say, would it have helped, would have been better if there was a central command. I think they're trying to get the commissioner to recommend, in order to avoid a misunderstanding from the government's perspective, to use something like the Emergency Act again, a central command where the intelligence is coordinated, filtered, worked, will be a good idea. I'm going to tell you right now, that's BS, because we already had all that. OPP were doing that. CSIS were doing that. You don't need one. And if you're going to have just one, you guys are going to be in trouble. That's called a monopoly. Okay, that's a monopoly. And anytime we have a monopoly on anything, whether it's commerce, goods, information, it's bad, because the environment that a monopoly exists in, it's not challengeable. You don't have opposition. You don't have competition. You don't have somebody saying, hey, we can do that better if we do this. A monopoly is a dictatorship. And that's why we don't, in many ways, we don't allow corporations to become a monopoly. Because once you got too much power, it's too much power. And look at this. The government is always cautious about corporations having too much power and making monopolies. But yet the government itself is the largest monopoly. We don't have competing governments. We have one. And yeah, so it looks like control, power, that's where they're going with that. And James, I think you're right. I think the government doesn't care about getting the thumbs up for using the Emergency Act, because they're fully aware they didn't have the right, it's not going to happen. But what they're willing to do is let others fall on their swords so that they can get a new command structure or something like that to come out of this. Just keep listening, James. I know you listen every day, and every time you hear the word central, it'll be command or intelligence or control. We'll be following that word, and that should be a scary thing. because we already have national level intelligence and policing, RCMP, CSIS. So I'm not sure why there's even a call for something different. If anything, what I would like to see is OPP share their platform and what they've done with every single province, and every single province should implement a police force, a provincial police force, and cooperate amongst themselves on that level. That's what I'd like to see happen. I don't like to see another centralized one that will dictate to all of those what they can do, all the way down to the local police level. That's just setting us up for a switch to shut off policing at any time on a local level by force without their consent. So we've seen movies where, you know, like the sheriff is fighting against the army too, because that's their property, that's their jurisdiction. That would be a really bad day in Canada if you've seen police forces fighting against another police force because they're fighting over jurisdiction. And they all have weapons. They all have training. They all have strategic combat mentality. So that would just be a mess. That would just be a real mess. And not a single protester in sight. It would just be police on police. All right, so we have about 4 minutes. What I'm trying to do here is stall a bit because my next chunk of notes is the Freedom Convoy, and it's long. So I'm going to kind of leave that for the end, or maybe the very next break. The next 15-minute break, I'll cover the convoy questions for this witness, and then the Government of Canada, which is a short one, and then we're going to get some more witness crosses right now. Well, folks, how are you liking the coverage so far? I don't have a plan. Just like the OPS, I didn't sit down and make a strategic plan. I don't have version 3 of anything. I'm just winging it. So yeah, how are you liking it so far? Keep going, make some adjustments. Do you want me to talk slower? Do you want things translated and transcribed as well? Or is the speed fine for you? I'm a little bit of a fast talker because there's a lot to get through. And hopefully it's not too fast for you. And James, hopefully I'm not bugging your ear and you don't hear me all day long after the stream as well. But yeah, let me know. Give me some feedback. If I hear nothing, I'll just go as is, and I'll just keep winging it. I'll do the OPS PLT strategy of just by the seat of my pants. But I'm having a good time. You know, it's a lot of work, lots of energy for sure. And I'm sitting here plugging away, taking notes like crazy. So I'm doing my best to capture as much as I can. I know there's not a lot of summary videos out there right now, even with the Canadian Constitution Foundation getting a couple out every second day or so. There's not many out. So this is kind of why I'm expanding as much as I do here, because these could become the summaries for some people. I do make these videos. I do release them as a package. I am a day behind. Yesterday was difficult to catch up, but I'll catch up. I'll catch up and I'll get them posted. Another question I have for you all is, what else would you like? Would you like more clips of certain pieces? Would you like maybe my closing and just that as a video? I've been hearing, you know, some suggestions that the closing statement is enough for the day. Let me know. I want to give you all the options. We keep coming back, so hey, okay. Thanks, Denise. You're awesome. Look, reach out to me if you want to give me your address. I'll send you some Jason Lavigne stuff, a coffee cup or something. You guys are amazing. Or if you just want to be friends and just hang out, that's cool too. But if you want to reach out, happy to send you something. You guys have been wonderful, especially James and Wayne and Prairie and Connie. This is great. It's great to see so many Canadians coming back regularly. They want to stay informed. They want more than just the inquiry itself. And I hope I'm giving you, I am biased in a way because I really believe that the protesters did the right thing for Canada. I really believe that that was a good event for Canada. So I am biased in that fashion because I'm also legally trained and I understand what the laws were and whether or not it was right or wrong. And I believe it was right. So I do have that bias, but I am doing my best to listen to all sides, listen to what the residents have to say, listen to what all the different organizations had to say, and you know, roll with it. I don't want to have a made up mind at the beginning. So I hope that comes across for you all, that I'm trying to be as fair and balanced as possible. But I do have a small bias, which is towards freedom. I am very happy with freedom. I would like to see more of it. So I do have that bias. And I do believe we were going to have Donald for Friday. I will let you know as soon as I got that confirmation. And Chris will be back tomorrow. So he did confirm to me tomorrow he is going to go get that microphone. So we received a few comments. I think he knew, I knew. It could be improved. If the government would invoke the Emergency Act, we would do that faster, especially if we're going to do interviews for people. It's faster to have the EA for that. A bit of a joke, but that's kind of where we're at with this right now, right? EA being used to bring in tow truck drivers, EA being used to quickly swear people in, EA being used to make it clearer that these red zones are legal. That's all we're hearing so far. Oh, nice to see you again, Sexy Find XYZ. You like to show up each day and contribute. Thanks a lot for that. Oh, Donald just confirmed to all of you right now, Friday is good. All right, Donald, that is now legal. That's binding. There's penalties, and I know how to execute an EA. So unless you want a red zone around your house, make sure you show up. So yeah, for Friday, oh, they just yelled in my ear. I can hear them now. Order, order. All right, well, enjoy. I'm going to go have a lunch. I'll take some more notes. Thank you very much.
The commission is in recess for 15 minutes. La commission levée pour 15 minutes.
All right, there we go. We got 15 minutes now. Audio's on. Everything's good. Good discussion in here. Welcome to the chat to Steve G. Nice to meet you. Yeah, your question's a good one. I'll bring it back up. Sorry for not understanding. This whole thing will prove the government sucks and the cops messed up, but what will the outcome really be? Officially, it's a report, a recommendation report. It's due for February 13th, 2023 or sooner. And we're suspecting it's going to recommend some things around coordinating efforts, maybe a central command, central intelligence. We've heard a few people kind of recommend that already to the commissioner, that out of this we should learn some lessons, and that could be one of them. Unofficially, same thing, central command, but maybe with global ties. Maybe each country is going to have a central command when it comes to police actions and intelligence, and then they'll connect up to a global one. That's the unofficial one, but it certainly looks like we're headed in that direction. So great question, Steve. And thank you, James, for answering too. Oh, Steve. Thanks. I think this country is in bigger trouble than most people realize. Yeah, well, I agree with you. Most people. Yeah, most people realize. Some people do. And some people are fighting it, Steve. So welcome to the channel. I hope you like what you see, hear. And, you know, we're trying to bring the message out and let people know what's going on and have a candid conversation here. So thank you for joining us, Steve. Elon bought Twitter. His bio says Chief Twitter. Wonderful. Cool. So that's breaking news. I guess that's official now. So I guess I can go look at my Twitter, and all my friends that were blocked are back. We'll keep an eye out for that. Wayne is one of them. So Wayne is a regular guest. He's here most days. He's not here today, but he's here most days, and he is blocked. And I think you're right, Steve. Yeah, no, bigger trouble. We're in bigger trouble than people realize. I agree. But to be a little optimistic about it, Steve, I don't think they're winning. You know, I don't think they're winning. I think their narrative is falling apart. And I don't just mean this inquiry with the government. I mean, what even pushed this event itself to happen. I think it's failing, but we'll see. I don't think they're doing great progress. Well, we got about 12 minutes left. So what I'm going to do is go through the Freedom Convoy questions for the previous witness and my notes around that. So this is still Inspector Bernier from the Ottawa Police Services. To recap, people that maybe not have seen him, he was a very truthful, honest, careful, calculated witness. We got lots of truth from him. He really blew open the door. We got all the questions I think we needed out of him, and it's looking good. So let's go ahead and review my notes on Bas Shirba from the Freedom Convoy. So first thing she did was brought up this whole radiological, biological, nuclear. They were making this whole scenario of anything was possible. So they needed to be ready for anything. Also implying that maybe the EA was used to allow more powers or something like that. But what she was able to get him to admit to was there is already an organization that's combined for all of those tasks under the RCMP. She mentioned the name. I didn't quite catch it. My fingers weren't fast enough. But there's an organization under the RCMP existing. So there's that magic word again, existing. So if there's anything existing that you can use, go ahead. So there would have been no need for the EA in order to respond to those kind of situations. Yep. And then she confirmed with him, does the RCMP have an organization? And he said yes. So he's aware of it too. So it's not just that they have one, but he's also aware of it. Now, here's an interesting one. She brought up the COVID-19 vaccine mandates at the OPS, kicked in on February 1st. You know, right in the middle of when they need the police the most, they kicked in a mandate, a vaccine mandate. And she did mention that at first he was pretending like he didn't understand what she was talking about. But then she directed him to, well, I'm referring to the one that you're aware of. That's the internal policy of OPS. Because he was pretending like it was like a federal mandate of some sort that he wasn't aware of. But no, it was the OPS's mandate that started on February 1st, vaccine mandate. He would have been aware because he would have had to deal with staff. She did bring up that rough estimates was 200 members could not report because of that vaccine mandate. And then he didn't confirm or deny the numbers. He just said he didn't have the numbers. But most certainly he's aware that he had some staff not available. We've heard numbers like 2,200 staff were total available. So 200, so that would have been around a 10%. And that's about right. It's around 10% of people didn't want to vaccinate. Unavailable. So he would have been very aware of how many people were not there. And then she asked, was there a consideration to waiving it so they can return to work? And his response was, well, that's not my responsibility. Not my responsibility. Not my job. All right. She continued on with the OPS PLU undermined the negotiations. She was asking if there was some undermining going on. And he said that they each have their own role and integrated properly. They should be working in unison. So she was asking about the problems, and he didn't confirm or deny. This is a witness that does a lot of that, not confirming or denying. But what he was saying was basically they all have their own job, and if they're doing it properly, things will be fine. Well, the question was, it wasn't proper. It fell apart. And then I think we went to the interaction for the day here. Snatch and grab. How many of you are police trained, security trained? Army, anything? Probably not many. Some of you are civilians just like me. Do you know what snatch and grab is? Yeah, you can figure it out. There's a couple terms. You're snatching somebody, you grab them, you do something with them. He acted as if that was the most foreign term he's ever heard in his entire life. Pretty sure he thought it was a mix of French and Latin and Greek all together because he had no clue what it meant. At least that's how he acted. And then it was described to him. Just to clarify definitions, this is something the Freedom Convoy likes to do. And merci beaucoup for not going into en français for the answer. But it's a method that the OPS used. Well, first he was asking, under what context are you talking about? Again, playing games. He knows exactly what she's talking about. And then the term is not a term I'm familiar with. They are arrest techniques that all public orders use on a public technique. So he knew exactly what she was talking about, but then he wanted to kind of sidestep the term itself because it sounds bad. And then just say, we have police actions and we do police stuff, and all police do that. But she kept pushing to specifically for this particular one because it is a tactic that was caught on tape many times, and it was even in reports and some sort of planning where the OPP said we don't do snatch and grab. They don't operate that way, I believe they were saying. So it's a arrest technique, just like, and then he said, snatch and grab is not something I am familiar with. Yeah, you are. Yeah, you are. You're more than splitting hairs here. You know exactly what was being asked of you. She did have to move on because when you have an uncooperative witness and you only have 25 minutes and maybe 5, if you're being efficient, you have to move on. And by the way, giving 5 minutes because someone's efficient and penalizing them when they're not efficient is counterproductive to the need of the 5 minutes. Kind of silly little logic there on the commissioner's side, but we'll move on too. It's also important to know the object It is true not everyone knew what the mission was. Oh, objective. It was important to know the objective. And it's true not everyone knew what the mission was. We've heard this many times. OPP, we've heard this from OPS, we've heard this from PLUs, we've heard this from inspectors, we've heard this from superintendents. There was no plan. Nobody knew what was the mission. They just were going to do a police action. Other than a grand mission of ending the protest, they didn't have specific missions and it weren't communicated. And here's, I think a lot of you picked up on this. How was it communicated to everybody? I sent out a sticker that outlined all the information with their authority on June 17th. So on June 17th, he sent out a sticker to put into their notebooks, which outlined their authority under the EA and what they're allowed to do now. And then she asked again, he said, yeah, as early as the evening of the 17th, there was a sticker that would go into the notebooks. So what she was getting at was there's a lot of confusion on the ground. There's going to be a lot of testimony, probably from the convoy side of things, that they were being told different things. Some police officers are saying, okay, you can do that. And other ones were being forceful. There was just complete miscommunication. One thing she did touch on, the 10 codes being different. Unfortunately, she used the wrong example because she said in the UK they're different, because that gave him an out to you say, well, that's the UK. We don't worry about that. The actual question she should have got to was between the police forces. So York region, Toronto police, all the other ones, Vancouver police came out, RCMP. They had many different levels of police officers. And actually what she was getting at was some departments have different codes. So if you had a bunch of police officers listening to a radio and it said code 10-4, that might mean all clear for one department, and that might mean red light, let's go, everybody, emergency. So what she was getting at was during the communication amongst all the different police agencies, there was some confusion around the codes because they did have different ones. But unfortunately, she used UK as an example, and I gave him an out to get out of that one. I'm not sure if it really matters too much, but I think where she was going at was you quickly put people in place. They didn't really have a common communication technique or coding system, and it did cause some confusion. And I think we'll hear about that later. We were a unified command and that approved this plan. So she got him to admit that, yeah, this was an approved plan. The 17th was the plan that they were using. We now know it was provided to him on the 9th. He worked on it from the 13th and on, and he was using it. And then who was the commander on the ground? There were multiple commanders, he said. There were multiple. So this goes back to the confusion on the ground. Multiple commanders, codes not necessarily being the same. Stickers are provided to teach them on what they can do. So you can just imagine how much confusion there is on the ground itself amongst the officers, the command, and exactly what they're trying to pull off, especially when there was no real mission or plan they were trying to execute on. And then there was nothing to say that the police should drive protesters outside the city. Oh, wow. Okay, yeah. So she brought up the whole picking people up and dropping them outside the city. We've gotten plenty of testimony about that as it happened. People right away. We've got video of somebody being arrested and grabbed, dragged away. And then we have video of hours later, that same person not in custody, not in jail, not charged, and released. So there's no question. We actually have some proof that there were people driven away from the scene and dropped off. However, what he wanted to talk about was what he called secondary processing units. And by the way, she also got him to kind of trip up on his own word, because early in his testimony, he was talking about how that day was one of the biggest storms they were dealing with as well. Not just the dealing with the protesters themselves, but there was also a storm. So she brought that back to him and said, by the way, when you're dropping people out, it was during that big storm you talked about earlier. So it was very good of her to bring that back, kind of bringing it back and putting words back into his mouth to remind the commissioner and everybody listening that these people who were being driven and dropped off, what was also happening during this biggest storm that he spoke about. That was very good on her. And then his response was, that's not how I would explain it. But she asked if you were aware, and he said, we had places to go where there was full teams of investigators to call lawyers to lay the charges. They were in close proximity to a bus route or transit, restaurants and gas stations. So he was implying, and within 20 minutes and 15 minutes of the downtown. So he was implying that they had secondary stations. I don't doubt that. I don't doubt that at all. But I also think that if you just beat up the protester, they're taking you away. If the protester had beat someone else up, then maybe they'll bring him to the secondary processing and actually lay charges. But at the end of the day, I do know that during the events, very few charges were laid. And as we heard the testimony last week, about 400 charges were laid after the fact, not at the time. So a majority of all the charges were laid after the event was done, going over video and other things, then laying charges, but not at the day. So these secondary processing centers weren't used that much. Okay, I've got some audio. Let me just make sure it's just a little early. So I'm going to ignore that audio for as much as I can until I actually see the commissioner. Oh, they just turned it off. Okay, cool. Let me go back to my note. Then, there we go, full team investigator. Yeah, so I believe they had them set up, but they just didn't utilize them. And that was his answer to the what we do know happened. Some people were absolutely driven out of the city and just dropped off in the middle of that snowstorm. No phone, no nothing. We have seen video, and we do have witnesses to that. We will learn later that that's not exactly the circumstances. So she let him know that we're definitely going to hear later that that's not what happened.
Order allowed.
All right, I think we're back. Okay, thank you, everybody. I'm going to catch you.
The commission
again
is reconvened. La commission reprend.
Well, folks, give me a second. I guess we can go home now. It's over, right? That very last question was really bad. So under the order of the PM office, they were letting them know that the EA was coming. And that's when they stopped the deal with the truckers. The OPS stopped the deal with the truckers, which was moving trucks out of downtown. So yeah, interesting. We found a few of those moments where the government itself interfered in a way that was not helpful to allow it to progress. Minister Marco wouldn't declare it an official legal occupation, which would have allowed them to use a lot more tools. So they stopped it there, and that could have helped. And now we're seeing PPS and the Prime Minister himself, his office, interfered with the OPS plan to move things to Wellington. PPS interfered because they didn't want them on Wellington at all, for whatever reason. And then the PM's office interfered by letting them know they're invoking the EA, which then caused the OPS to cancel the deal with the convoy truckers. Oh, I think the commissioner got that. I don't think that's by him at all. It's going to be, it's not even an uphill battle anymore. There's no digging out of a grave here. The government now is going to sit back and try and minimize things, try and explain things, and try and do their best to distract. Farfada came up again. I don't know who Farfada is. I was kind of hoping that the description or explanation would happen there. It didn't appear that they knew much about him either. All I've really known is just a small group so far that was there in some capacity, and they keep pointing to them as the extreme end of things. I don't know enough about them to comment on it. I really thought Dalanglong was going to make its appearance, but he came out of left field with Jan 6. A lot of us with the tinfoil hats were told, you know, Jan 6, this thing kind of related. Each government wanted some sort of event in order to bring down some additional things on residents, opposition, people that didn't agree with them. And up until now, we didn't see a real connection to Jan 6, at least from the government's perspective, actually from anybody's perspective, because that wasn't the same at all. But here it is, Canadian government bringing in Jan 6. They're dropping that big bomb and saying, I think you're going to see a lot more of that. You're going to see a lot more that the government was concerned about a Jan 6 type thing. But we're nowhere close. We're nowhere close. All right, folks, I'm going to jump to where we left off in the notes. I kind of talked a little bit there at the end about the commissioner's question. I will kind of get back to those a bit at the end, but we do have several pages, so let's go. Where we left off was the convoy questions for the first witness of the day, which was Inspector Robert Bernier, Ottawa Police Services. Yeah, so today was all Ottawa Police Services. So the OPP, who was next in line after Bernier, they went back up the list to this one. So we'll see OPP tomorrow then. So it'll be an OPP Thursday. That should be good. All right, so back to the convoy trucker. We were leaving off with the secondary processing sites, what they were, where they used, and the fact that they also had an alternate site. They didn't have to call it a secondary or processing because there was no processing. It was just the drop-off sites. Where she left off on that was we will have information later. So we'll learn about all of this stuff later, but she did ask if he approved the plan, and he did approve the plan. He did approve the plan. I don't think the plan listed this alternate drop-off stuff, but he approved the plans that everybody was working with. And then she got into some question about Tom and Tamara. So do you know who Tom, Tamara, and the others are? They fully cooperated. He was claiming he didn't know who they were. At least he was using language like at the time. He certainly learned who they were later. We found out that there's a PLT report that listed them all. So we'll get to that one later. Even after the 17th plan, there were still communications and integration problems. So I guess she was trying to find out, was everybody talking with everybody? And he just kind of brushed it off. Any operation has challenges. Sure. But she was being very specific. So she asked again, there was no communication plan. And he said, well, there was an appendix plan, which he then explained was just a basic add-on that they always had. It would list the equipment they use and this their setup. I've seen stuff like this. These are like just documents that they'll throw on every plan, nothing specific to the event. But then if there is something specific to the event, that would be in the plan itself. So they were just using a regular communication plan. Then she found out and let us know that there was a 12-month requirement to be requalified in order for the rules of engagement. So every 12 months, officers that are going to be in engagement, they have to go get a certification and make sure they're cool and make sure they understand it. They're not going too far, all that kind of stuff. But surprisingly, that one was suspended. They suspended that program. They didn't suspend the vaccine mandate program at the OPS, but they suspended the requirement to have your certification. And then he explained how they suspended or they exempted people. So they didn't suspend the program. They exempted people from requiring it. And I'm not sure how that's a public safety, how that helps the public safety at all. So now you have officers who are outside of their certification and they're now out there performing actual event, touching the people, doing things that actually had physical interaction. And that's what this training and certification is for, to make sure they don't go overboard. I just find it neat that they will suspend that program or give people exemptions of that program, but not to the vaccine mandate program when they even needed officers. So I found that interesting. They are willing to suspend certain programs when it fits them. Then we saw the video again. This is where she brought the video, and he made the comment, there's not enough for me to see what's going on. I find that to be a bit of a wow. He was deflecting again, trying to get away from that particular video. It's a sad, disturbing video. There's a lot going on there. But the guy with the backpack is what he's referred to later when we see this video again. And then he did talk about the multiple locations outside of the city where the truckers were planning to go. And again, this is Van Cleek Hill, and there's another one. But Van Cleek Hill is about 45 minutes outside of the city on a good day. And then he even mentioned that multiple locations outside the city and a great distance away. Great that that came out, because that was absolutely being worked on. The next phase of the protest was going to be busing everybody in to continue the protest, clearing the streets, residential streets, but just bringing it down to maybe a handful of trucks on Wellington and then people. Everybody was heading in that direction, all the way down to securing the land in Van Cleek Hill, a farmer's field. The trucks were also leaving under the mayor's plan, and he did not receive information. Yeah, so the mayor's plan, he didn't know about it. So trucks were leaving, and he was not receiving that information. But from his perspective, which would have been cameras and reporting, he said he saw minimal movement. But you know, that's a bit of a cop out. Go look outside, see if they're moving. You can physically see trucks and stuff driving in the opposite direction. Well, great. Truth is, where they could move the trucks, they were, and where they couldn't move the trucks, they couldn't. And those were because they were blocked by the police themselves. And we hear about that later as well, that the police themselves are blocking the trucks from exiting. Okay, so if it was not for the lack of the OPS operation and cooperation, sorry, the lack of the cooperation, at the rate they were going at that time when they were moving the trucks out, and if they got rid of the blocks and kept going, most of the downtown would have been cleared by Wednesday the 17th, right? And then his response was, we were working on egress routes to assist them. They were not leaving. You say some of them are moved, and then he says a small amount of vehicles. So even though he said they're not leaving, he did have to admit that even a small amount of vehicles were moving, because it's going to be impossible to say no vehicles are moving, because there's plenty of video of vehicles moving, and there's also plenty of video of vehicles running their engines behind barricades, wanting to move. Then we saw the government of Canada come up. Oh my gosh, they definitely have a theme where they want to embellish it so much that it's going to turn into the worst event in Canadian history, but it won't. So they kept talking about increased volatility. It was getting agitated. There were violent elements. What's a violent element? What is a violent element? Is it a guy with long hair? Like, what is a violent element? I don't even know what that is. I'm trying to, like, I know what the stereotype and I know what the prejudice that they're trying to use here says, but we're supposed to be legal and we're supposed to be staying away from stuff like that. So what is a violent element? I have no idea. Actually, before I continue this, let me check the comments. Oh my, we've got a lot of these bots today. So sorry about that, everybody. Yeah, it's Donald Trump's fault. Yeah, I'm surprised his name hasn't come up yet. It may. We'll see what happens when the government talks again. Because we're going to see a lot of Government of Canada witnesses, a lot of them. So you think the representative and the lawyers are bad right now. The witnesses will be on the stand too, or the seat. Early days, plenty of time for them to... Yeah, for sure. For sure. And look, this is what I think they were hoping for all over the place. They're provoking responses from people. And I think they're trying to provoke certain groups because they have these stereotypes and prejudices in their mind that these groups will respond the way they think they do, which is wrong. And that could be why they use terms like violent elements. Like, what is that? Is that a stovetop element that attacks somebody? We know what they're trying to get at, but I don't understand why that's been brought into a legal proceeding, because it's not even a thing. And then again with the possibility. Obviously a possibility was his response to it, that there could be violent elements. Of course, well, because we don't even know what violent element means. It could just be anything that can become violent. Well, that's true all the time. I've got young kids. They can be violent anytime. Firearms. Then the government of Canada started bringing firearms. This is another one of those boogeyman things that they love to do. And maybe they're trying to tack on some more of this firearm regulation that we're seeing recently. But there were not even a single bullet that I'm aware of by anybody, police or otherwise, was actually discharged. That was it's a moot point. Like, it was never happened. There was no guns. You didn't even see them brandishing them, just the police. Something we monitored and assessed. Sure, because all that simply means is we'll get a report and we'll respond to it. We'll monitor it and assess. It doesn't mean anything. Okay, and all large crowds, all of them have a potential. It doesn't mean anything. And again, with the word possibility, they really loved saying that as an answer to things. And then he just actually admitted in front of the government of Canada, which I'm going to try and clip that one because it was a bad one for the government of Canada. Because the answer that came out of him was he just said that there was different ways he could have done it without the EA, where he was talking about ways of dealing with the crowd without the EA. The government kind of just pretended to ignore his answer on that one and just moved to the next question. But oops, under the government of Canada's cross itself, he said there was many different ways to have handled it without the EA. And at that point, my note says, boom, done. they were under there we go, that's right, because he was listed off common law, and he didn't utilize because we did execute the police operation. Yeah, I didn't have a chance to actually utilize the common law. They decided to execute the operation, and the EA came in shortly after that. And then great, I have a note here, the great job on the answer, because her question was the law was hard to understand. That's something that the government of Canada, for some reason, thinks is relevant, that because common law is difficult, that they needed a clearer, more extreme law. No. You came to that a couple times. Oh, and then I also noted that after the convoy, at least in June and July around Canada Day, and I believe there's even a certain red area today around the Parliament Hill that exists today. There is no EA in a force today, of course, we know that. However, there is an exclusion zone, a red zone, and there was another one put in around Canada Day. So that just goes to show you, with evidence, that there was a law. There's definitely laws. There's ways for them to make an exclusion zone around Parliament Hill without the EA. So the government of Canada didn't do themselves much justice. They just spent a bunch of time embellishing, and then they went and let him slip out the line that the EA wasn't needed. And then they were trying to diminish it by saying it was still a benefit because it was clearer for people to understand that they would be in trouble. I don't like that at all. I don't like how they talk like that, and it certainly is not what the EA is for. They failed, and it was embarrassing. I didn't get the notes from Melissa from the city of Ottawa because I was working on something during that part, but I was paying attention to her. There was a lot of back and forth that the city was in planning, and they were working with the Freedom Convoy. And as far as the city was concerned, they had ways to try and get it to happen. They were using the meeting with the mayor as a carrot to get them to go ahead and work with them. And the city manager was involved, so Steve Kay. So from the city's perspective, they were trying to do things to move this along. And I guess in the end, they weren't quite pleased that their plans got ignored. The information from their plans weren't going through, and they actually had some impediments from the PPS, it turns out, to fulfill their plans. So they weren't a lot of questions that I got notes for, but I do recall it was a lot about the city was working on a plan and you guys kind of interfered, and there was no information going on back and forth. Paul Champ, this guy, man. I think the best video we've seen so far, though, because he played the Keith Wilson video where Keith Wilson was given the proper legal advice, you know, peaceful, you got to do it this way. Don't bother coming here if you're thinking otherwise. It's a good video. They did cut it off and ended it right at the wrong spot, because the next part of that video was more emphasis from, I can't remember his name, but he was also saying peaceful this, peaceful that. You guys just be smart. They'll hear our message, that kind of messaging. But stay peaceful, stay smart, listen to the lawyer. So thank you, Paul, for playing that video. And then Rob Kittredge, the Democracy Fund. He's one of my favorite guys. He's a very good lawyer. He's doing a good job. He got him on a roll of a whole whack of questions related to you had the powers. And what kept coming out was the word yes. So you had the powers, yes. You're all ready to go, yes. You had common law, and you had the traffic law, and you had provincial law, yes, yes, yes. So he was talking about the plan that he had before the EA, and it already had a bunch of laws that was applicable to him and that he was going to use. And would you have carried out? Oh, right. So then he got him to establish that the plan was ready. On the 17th, they had a plan. Remember, he was working on it since the 13th. He was skiing before that, so he's refreshed to go. So on the 17th, he had a plan. And then the question was, well, if the EA wasn't out, like if the EA didn't come down the pipe, were you going to be comfortable with your plan? Could you have kept going with your plan? And his answer was yes. So the question was, would you have carried out the plan without the EA? You would have carried out the plan without the EA, sorry. And the answer was correct. the plan was already in place, and I didn't know the EA was in place. So he even let it slip out on the 17th that he didn't even know it was coming down. It wasn't even something he was looking at, aware of, asking for. It wasn't even in his tool chest. Why would it be? He's not looking at a war here. So his plans completely were created without any acknowledgement that the EA was even something you can play with. Probably because he didn't even know about it, because why do we? This is not something that we would be looking into for Emergency Act on a national level. So whether he knew or not, it wasn't even in his mind while he was putting his plan together. And then they got into that whole beneficial, useful, helpful. So Rob got him to say beneficial, but Rob was awesome by saying beneficial, but not necessary. Correct. Quoted him as saying correct. Beneficial, but not necessary. And then he asked if you didn't see the tow truck letter till today, correct? So there's a letter about the tow truck drivers that was going to be used in a way to coerce tow truck drivers in some way. But he never even saw that letter, never even used it until today. So even if the EA came down, this letter that was presented in court as a necessary tool to get tow truck drivers to move and participate, as far as he's concerned, it wasn't even delivered. He didn't even see it till today. So it was a non-issue, but it was brought up as evidence showing that the EA needed to be used. Then he was reminded that tow trucks were already on the way to Ottawa on the 13th. And then he confirmed that information was provided to him. He did know that. October 13th, tow truck drivers and tow trucks were on their way to Ottawa to assist. Then you saw some tow truck drivers, some tow trucks before the 17th. They were arriving, right? And he confirmed, yes. He did physically see even tow trucks arriving before the 17th. Very important, right? Because part of this narrative was tow truck drivers were not willing and all that kind of stuff. But as far back as the 13th, which would have been before the Emergency Act, trucks were on their way. People were going to assist on that. Provincial Emergency Act, the Municipal Emergency Act was in place. And we also heard from the OPP that after the EA was dropped, they had less willing participants on the tow truck side of things because it became more of a war zone as far as they're concerned. But anyways, we did hear testimony that they had X number of tow trucks coming, EA gets put in place, less trucks coming. So this whole narrative that they needed it to get tow trucks is completely been demolished. Trucks were on the way before, trucks were there on the day, and trucks were still coming. That letter, even if sent, it didn't get, I got a note here that says, didn't get to the truck to arrive before sent. Right, so the letter itself, even if it was sent later, it had no effect on trucks arriving by the 17th. And he says it appears so. In the absence of the OPS, OPP, RCMP, and part of the Unified Command, we're going to clear. What do I have there? Yes. The absence of the OPP, part of the Unified Command. Oh, yeah, I guess, yeah, I'm going to have to skip that one because I can't quite remember what that was about, but I do remember they brought together the OPS, the OPP, the RCMP, and the Unified Command. Right, so they were all approved of the plan. They had no problem, and they weren't using the EA in the plan. All of them. He said yes. Everyone is saying it was helpful but not necessary, correct? Yes. So once again, he got him to say it wasn't necessary. That's important. All right, I'm going to jump over to here. Good stuff. No more of those bots showing up. All right, Canadian Civil Liberties Association, they did a good job, came in quick, didn't have much to do. Basically just straight out ask him, did you have the powers already to accomplish what you needed to do on your February 17th plan? Yes. Now at this point, he's getting pretty deflated because he knows through these questioning from the last three representatives, it's just not good. And the truth is coming out. You did not ask for it, or was it necessary? And here he goes back to, I would say it was beneficial, but necessary, no. So I guess he learned his lesson from Rob in the previous one that, yeah, we hear you when you keep saying beneficial, but it wasn't necessary. And that is the standard. It has to be necessary. No other option. You did not require any additional powers. Correct. So Canadian Civil Liberties Association, crushed it. That was wonderful. You got him to admit it wasn't necessary, and he had other powers. That's it. That's a standard. There's like, we really could go home here, but I really want to hear Trudeau, so I'll stick around for 20 more days for this. Then we moved on to Jessica Barrow from the Ottawa Police Services. It's always interesting to see the representative from the witness itself do some question, because usually it's a lot of butt covering. But what she ended up doing was working on the information intelligence. There was more than one source. Yes. Can you explain? And he started to expand on the difference between information and intelligence. The process is to collect and turn it into an intelligence. So collect information, analyze it, think about it, add some neurons to it, and turn it into intelligence. So he basically was explaining that. And then prior to the arrival, did you read any Hendon reports? I think this is the biggest star that we're never going to see, is the Hendon reports themselves. On the stand. This is quite the witness that keeps popping up, these reports. But no, he did not see any until the 27th. And it was something that's new to him that he didn't even know existed. I find that part interesting. Look, maybe you're not getting all the reports. Maybe you're not on the distribution chain. But to not even know that they exist, and they've been around for a couple of years, to not even know that they exist, and OPS is a recipient of every one of them, that seems weird. Why wouldn't this become one of the, it's an official source, it's coming from the OPP. Why wouldn't that be something that they start utilizing and incorporating into their operations? So surprising that a commander level, who's able to do things like sidestep the chief, he himself doesn't have access or is not receiving these. We do know there were several OPS people that did receive them, including Bell, way before the 27th as well. And then we also heard testimony that slowly he himself too wasn't receiving them. And then at one point he asked for all of them. I think he was getting ready for something, because all the reports, it seems to be weird that it goes back prior to the convoy itself, but he requested all of them, because I think what he's going to end up doing with that is show for how long as a chief he was being withheld proper intelligence, these particular reports. And I bet you he'll probably go back from all the way to his day one and say, I haven't seen these. That'll be something else. So I don't think we'll see that here. So it was new to him, didn't know existed. So he was absolutely isolated from the intel. OPS Bell and the team had it. Others in OPS had it. Slowly didn't, and the witness didn't. So there was some good divides going on around the intel. And then she used the term connect the dots. Come on, these are professionals. This is not something they're supposed to be doing. You have more certainty than that. My kids play connect the dots. Then there was a meeting on the 12th or the 13th, so just before the Emergency Act. At that time, the question was, were you the commander? So he went through this whole thing and said, yeah, I was the commander at that time. And how did you decide who to put into which positions? Then he looks at intelligence, the media. He knows the people, how their abilities, and adds and puts them in. And then he does something that a lot of witnesses will do. They'll use their lingo. So KSA. And then she had to ask, what's a KSA? Knowledge, skills, abilities. So we learned a little bit there. And then the last question I think I got for her, how was the quality of the command table? When it came in, it was very, yeah. So once it was set up, once his command table was set up, his integrated command table, she asked, how was it? And then all of a sudden it was glowing. We went from dysfunctional, confused, not sharing information to glowing all of a sudden. Because he's saying when he came in, which was around the 12th or 13th, it was a very cohesive group, high functioning, he says. Really? Really? I think we find out later you're not so right. Anyways, he spent a lot of time talking about how it was dysfunctional, and then he ends with very cohesive, high functioning. Okay, and then we moved on to the re-exam from the Commission Council. So this is where they already did their cross, and now something else came up, and they want to come back in and ask some more questions. And this was around the tow trucks. So I guess I'm really liking the Commission Council, because clearly they're not not on the side. They're doing a very good job being impartial and bringing out the truth, because this was not good for the witness or the government. So it was about tow trucks. So had him go to page 59, scroll down and saw that this section was signed. I don't know if one of those were his, but I think that's what was being applied, because he validated the signature or signatures. And normally when you're doing that, you're asking someone to validate their signature, basically putting that document in front of them saying, all right, you're on notice going forward. You have to agree with everything you see here, because you've seen this before you signed it. So it's a friendly reminder to just be prepared. But went to page 59, and it was called, they referred to it as a towing subplan. He confirmed yes. Then on page 65, it lists some equipments and had him read it out. Yes, there's 12 heavy wreckers, 2 tilt load, et cetera, et cetera. The list went on for a bit. Equipment prep trucks, and will assist with loading. So equipment list. All right, right there in black and white is a bunch of equipment in this plan. And he was asked, what is your understanding of the availability on the 18th? And he said they were ready to go. So everything, and even in that plan, and remember that plan was built on the 13th, because that's where he made that plan. At least on the 13th where he was working on it. So at this point, they were ready to go. He knew about the tow trucks. He didn't need the EA. That's where we're going with this. Then he referred to Tom Curry asking, which is Peter Slowly's attorney. Tom Curry asked, why did you not take further steps about the bizarre disconnect earlier? So earlier when Peter or Tom Curry brought that up, we talked about that at the break, the lunch break, that there was a bizarre disconnect, and that he didn't have complete access to information. So I'm glad that the Commission Council also picked up on that Tom Curry stuff, because did you have information or not? What's the disconnect? Where we're getting at here is the Bell's team had a different plan than the other team, and there was a disconnect. And Bell had more information than this witness did. So the Commission Council was bringing that back too, confirming that the intelligence was messed up for them. Excuse me. Why was it appropriate for officers to defer to others who had access to the intelligence? So the Commission Council was kind of annoyed that he kept deferring to other people for the intelligence. He didn't read it. He had other people read it. I think we even heard this witness say he doesn't even read all his emails. He has part of this team will do it, and they'll bring it to him. That's not a good thing to do. I can see why it's efficient for you, but you're a commander. You need to know what you're talking about here. You need to know what you're doing here. They were section responsible. I did not. And then he says it does not fall in my purview. I don't like when people say that. So understanding the intelligence, so he's delegating it down, and it's not his job. And he defers to those sections, trusting it to the right people. Well, maybe a lesson learned there. You should also read some of the intelligence. So he's now admitted to not having the Hendon reports or using open source, which is public. So what information did he have? He wasn't using the OPP source. He wasn't using open source. The only thing he's left with is whatever OPS itself was creating. And we do hear later that it was provincial and federal level information he was looking at. The commissioner, we covered these ones. So the commissioner asked a couple questions at the end about information intelligence and where it's coming from. And that's where he then continued to talk about they don't use open source at the time, but now they do. So that was him. Then we moved on to Acting Superintendent Robert Drummond. Another decent witness. I think these last two OPS witnesses have been good for the OPS in that it's going to help them at least have credibility and at least some respect left, because they reluctantly but honestly, I think, have been representing their positions. Acting Superintendent Robert Drummond has a memory problem, apparently, because he forgot a lot. And in fact, at one point, it kind of almost seemed like they were probing whether or not he did have a memory problem, because I don't know if it's in my notes, but one of the questions was about him forgetting stuff. Yeah, he had a lot of gaps in his memory. So if you looked at my chat, there was some comments around that. All right. And So the Commission Council established that Drummond oversees operations, met with Steve K and Tom. Steve K met with Tom Marazzo. Yes, he was aware of that. It also seems like Drummond is the PLT coordinator. So he's the one responsible for working with the PLT teams as well, which means he would have been very aware of what was going on in Coventry, the OPS operation to arrest people. He would have been aware of all that. And council did establish that he did understand the city's deal. He was aware of the mayor's deal, and because they wanted to shrink the footprint and it would help them out. And his response to that was, yeah, and we were interested in moving them. So right off the bat, there seems to be a little bit more cooperation with this witness, with the city, and knowing that there's stuff going on. Because the previous witness had no idea that the mayor had a deal going on, working with the protesters. This one does. So lots of disconnect. Does this one not talk to part of the integrated command table? Like, are they not integrated? Who are you integrated with if it's not even your own OPS? We'll keep going. Did you know the communication broke down? All right, so here was an interesting one where all groups via the PLT. We've heard this narrative a lot that the OPS PLT communication team broke down with the convoy truckers, and we've heard a lot of reasons kind of why. They kind of set them up for that fuel thing. They stopped talking to even OPP PLT. But now this witness, who's in charge of the PLTs, denies that. So it was posed to him, did you know this communication broke down with the convoy? And he says, no, it did not. We talked to all groups via PLT. So from his testimony, he's saying PLT never stopped at any point. We have heard testimony that PLTs are standing around in a room, not on the road. And we've heard testimony that they did cut off, at least in Coventry. So whether he's not informed, forgot, or covering his butt, he didn't agree that the communication between the convoy and PLT broke down. Then he went back to the city agreement, and council had him agree that it was a win-win agreement with the city. They use that term. It was a win-win, so everybody gets a win. And then he says, I think it was a win in the sense that we were working towards negotiations. PLT is to get to a solution. So again, because he's part of the PLT, his goal is to get to a solution. And he did see this agreement with the city as a win in the sense that it was helping them work towards negotiation. So great. You're talking to the protesters. People seem reasonable. This OPS officer is aware of all of that. And one of his comments on why it was a good idea was it would be face-saving. Or the question was posed to him, it would be face-saving. And he said, yes, it was a positive thing. Of course it was. Anytime you're working with negotiations, you're in the right track. You're going the right way. It's when you break those down that you have some other problems. And then he was quoted saying there was a group looking for a possible exit strategy. Oh, no, so it was quoted to him because someone else said it. And then his response was, I don't know if he would call it exit strategy. They were looking to move out certain streets. So when posed to him, like there was an exit strategy for the convoy, they wanted to meet and leave. That's basically the entire conversation they've always had. We want to meet and leave. Meet the mayor, meet the prime minister, and leave. Didn't get either one of those. So they were working on an exit strategy, but he wouldn't confirm that. He just said it was basically just moving stuff from certain streets. Now, that could be referring to the moving everything to Wellington. But the next step would have been to exit once they had a meeting. The protesters were looking for a meeting with the mayor. Yes. So he confirmed that he did know they were looking for a meeting with the mayor. Mr. Marazzo would facilitate the moving from the streets. Yes. So he was aware of the participants and what they're working on. They agreed to open Rideau and Sussex. When the meeting was done, Tom would try and facilitate it. And do you recall a response from PPS? So at this time, the committee council was starting to establish whether or not PPS was involved in poking around this particular deal. We do find out later that, yeah, But at this point, he says, I don't recall many emails. And if there was one, I don't recall. Then he moved on to, was Tom able to move them? No. Why? Well, because that group was not really part of the main group. Tom tried and was hopeful. However, they wouldn't move. So that's goodwill on Tom's part. 100%. Tom went over there, probably full of ambition and hope, maybe a little naive, but you got to try because nobody else is. So Tom became the actual PLT, the actual liaison for the police in this particular encounter, and not successful. You know, they're not part of the main group. They don't have the same ambition. This particular group's got other things going on. He went and talked to them. He was safe. He wasn't harmed. Nobody was harmed. But they established that they had their own, right? So this group had multiple groups in it. We see this later, the Government Canada on this witness too. They were upset because the plan was not approved. So something happened there. Mr. Marazzo had a plan. He lost some good faith when the group couldn't. Okay, so this was another part of the mayor's plan to move stuff. And so this isn't Sussex anymore, the Rideau Sussex. We're now at a different location. And Tom did have an agreement to move trucks. However, they're blocked and they couldn't get out. And what this witness did end up saying was he didn't have approval to let them do that. So there was this agreement, something along the lines of, hey, truckers, let's get out of here. And they want to get out of here. And they want to leave on, let's say it was a Tuesday. I can't remember the actual day. But they didn't get approval. So that day comes and goes, and now they're all pissed because they wanted to go, they wanted to do their deal, but they were blocked and they couldn't. So then they lost some good faith there because they wouldn't move. There was no approval. The PLUs were at the meeting with Steve K. We had another incident here where this particular witness is not jiving with other witnesses and other documents, actually. So Steve K testified that there were some PLU, PLTT members there in the meeting. He named one of them and then said, and other members. But this witness said, no, that can't be, because he knows where the PLT members were and he spoke to them and they said they weren't at the meeting. So that's interesting. Whatever is going on there, Steve K says, hey, yeah, OPS PLT was with me. He named one. And then PLT commander says, no, my people say you weren't there. I don't think that's going to help the government any at all. Certainly is not going to advance their position. But miscommunication, people not paying attention, and who's really recalling it correctly. I would give my credit to Steve K because he's a party witness. So he said, I was there along with ABC. Whereas this witness wasn't there, and they're using third-party information, hearsay, right? And because they weren't a party, I'm going to have to say, you got too many people between you and the event that could have given you incorrect information. So I would understand that Steve K was probably the one more accurate on that recall. And then we got the big news. We actually figured out what happened here. This is what we've been waiting for quite some time. Who killed the deal? We've been waiting. I thought it was OPS killed it because there was that deal that was being moved, and then all of a sudden, boom, it was off, and then boom, the Emergency Act drop. Turns out it was the PPS, so Parliamentary Police Services, or Protective Services, Parliamentary Protective Services. They're the ones that pulled the plug. Now, I think they're trying to set up that they pulled the plug because of the proximity to the Parliament Hill itself, like physical proximity. They would worry about a Jan 6 type of thing. Maybe they're throughout the halls. They're all saying, this is our Jan 6, this is our Jan 6, get ready for it. Because they're kind of acting like they were expecting that to happen. Of course, it didn't happen. They didn't come close to happen. It was also February, so not January. But anyways, it looks like the PPS is the one that said no deal to the Wellington. We're going to kill that plan, and that was the plan that the city, OPS, OPP, Convoy, PLT, we can go through this all day long, all accepted, and we're working towards doing. So Why did the Parliamentary Protective Services decide that's enough of that? And then moments later, we're looking at an Emergency Act. Overreaction? String pulling? We'll get there. We'll get there. City of Ottawa was next. Very short notes for City of Ottawa. Because it was more around the officers, some officers were ashamed to wear the uniform. They were talking about how they didn't even have full support amongst the OPS itself because people were not happy with how protesters and Canadians were being treated and the orders that were coming down and things that were happening. So within the OPS itself, there were officers that were vocalizing and upset that this is happening, and they were ashamed to wear the uniform. I think that's quite telling. Okay, you don't have consensus inside the OPS as this is even a bad event, but yet we keep hearing that they wanted consensus and 100% cooperation from the truckers for everybody to be on one page, but yet OPS is not on one page. Nobody's on one page because the reality is whenever you have a group of 2 or more people, you're definitely going to have consensus issues. 2 or more people is the limit right there. Rebecca Jones for Peter Slowly. Very good. Oh, sorry, I missed a line here for City of Ottawa. The city had a deal, and the goal was to move 38 trucks to Wellington. So now they're starting to bring out numbers because they keep saying lots of trucks, a big mass. Now the City of Ottawa said, no, look, we made a deal about moving 38 trucks, Roedeau and Sussex. 38. We're not talking hundreds. It was 38. That was the deal with the city. And then Rebecca, she's protecting Peter Slowly quite well. The entire testimony was about who had the information and who has the rank and who has control, and then Slowly have everything he was supposed to have. We've been hearing a lot of this from Slowly representatives because it's clear that they're setting it up for liability, control, command, and we'll hear a lot more on Friday from Peter Slowly. Paul Champ, I got one line for this one. I was very disappointed with his questioning here. He's really going harsh on this whole fuel, hay bales, propane tanks, fireworks at night bouncing off of windows. Paul, you don't even have a cracked glass. So can you stop now? And then at the end, he does this, he's painting everybody as victims, including the protesters. So he called them victims of their own freedom. So he was worried for them that they would catch themselves on fire and become victims of their own freedom. Well, Paul, Freudian slip or not, for you to say of their own freedom means you agree they were fighting for freedom. So Paul, have a seat. They're no longer occupiers. They are protesters. Occupiers don't fight for freedom. Protesters do. So you calling them victims of their own freedom, you've just confirmed and you've just admitted they were protesters. Brendan Miller came back up. I got some good notes here for Brendan. Freedom Corp. He's very, very to the point, and I like his style. The PLT report was sent around. So here's where we're hearing again about the PLT report and the association with the leaders of the convoy and who they were, trying to establish that whole bunch of people in the OPS knew who the leaders were, and there should be no confusion. But Tom was one of them, and this witness said, yes, he's aware of that. And then he's highlighting that Tom had control over 322 trucks. Okay. 322 trucks. So that's all that he, well, I don't say all, that's a lot, but that's what he identified that he had buy-in on, that he represented. Good job, Tom. Like, very good job, Tom. You're an organizer and you're a leader. Naturally, it looks like. And then there was asked, do you remember that? There were 322 trucks. He had to say, yes, he does remember that number popping up somewhere in his, the documents. He does remember seeing 322 with Tom Marazzo responsible for them. Your team was engaged with Tom on February 7th, and he was looking for an inspector level to provide, to help move more trucks. Okay, so some of the problem that Tom was running into here was blocks. Things were blocked. At one point, the police did put down barricades all over the place and physically blocked a whole bunch of roads and access. It wasn't the truckers that blocked this stuff. It was the police. So he was frustrated. Tom was frustrated. He was on the ground trying to get the trucks to move, but then there's a barricade. And then he would approach an OPS officer or PLT and say, hey, look, we need this barricade to move. We have a deal with the city, and we're trying to execute it. And then the officer would say something along the lines like, I don't know what you're talking about, and I'm not going to move that. So there's a lot of breakdown on actually getting action out of the OPS to do things. So what Brendan was looking for here was on February 7th, okay, there's a whole week before the Emergency Act was even invoked. February 7th, there was breakdown on the ground of cooperation with the OPS officers themselves. So Tom's looking for an inspector level officer to work with him, because you need to go up the ranks in order to get the lower ones to do the things. And he was being denied that. He didn't get one. And then it was asked from Brendan, did the people underneath you tell you that Tom was looking for an inspector level? And he said, no. So I guarantee you, this is how this went down. Tom was on the road, cold, February 7th, doing what he can, running around to trucks, getting consent, getting them to agree. They're going to move. There's a barrier in the way. He runs around looking for someone to move it, getting no cooperation. Nobody on the ground is willing to bring me the manager type of situation. Nobody's going to give him anybody. And in fact, they didn't even report it up and even try. So sorry, Tom. It looks like the OPS failed you massively here, and it might have been on purpose, because they keep pointing to the inability to move as fast, and all of them as kept escalating things, but yet they're the ones that created the situation, blocked in the trucks, and made it very difficult for you to do anything. And I guarantee you, Tom, had you physically moved those barriers yourself somehow, or broke them in half and drove through, you'd be on charges immediately, destruction of property, city property. So you were doing the right thing. You were quite literally uphill battle the whole way, it looks like. And Tom, we haven't even heard from you yet. We're only hearing from the other witnesses, and you can see that you were doing what you could, and they were not helping. You could have moved the barriers that blocked the truckers from leaving, and his answer was yes. So he was aware that OPS was able to move the barriers. They were the city's property, and of course OPS can do that. They can order it, or they can ask for the truck, but they're the ones that would have been providing the permission to do it. And then Brandon made it pretty clear that they would not move. That the officers on the ground said they're not moving them. Then Brendan asked if they moved the barriers on February 8th, it could have been done. And then the witness says, I think there was a concern that if they were leaving. Oh, okay, I see what I had. Sorry, my note was kind of. So what happened was they wanted to. So it looks like by February 8th, so this is the very next day, February 7th, he was trying to get an inspector level contact. February 8th, it looks like they got the message, and maybe somebody is trying to move it now, but they didn't get approval. So Brendan quickly asked, well, approval from who? Who's the one that needs to give the approval for that? And Patterson. He brought up Patterson. So there we go. Patterson's under the bus. We actually have an OPS name now of somebody who stopped the trucks from leaving. That's what this entire line of questioning is for, is who stopped the trucks from leaving on the 7th and the 8th. And it was Patterson. Now, keep in mind, this is where it broke down too, because everybody was trying to move on the 7th and 8th, couldn't move. Then they got upset. The deal was from their side being broken, breached. And also, you can imagine you sitting there for hours and hours. You're ready to leave, and you just won't be allowed. You'll get frustrated. So Brandon did a clarifying confirmation question. So you're saying Patterson didn't approve the moving of the barriers? Correct is the answer. That's not good. They're interfering. February 14th, the mayor's agreement with Steve Kay said they would help to move trucks out on February 14th. Then it stopped. So Brendan was saying, hey, look, February 14th, they were working on the mayor's agreement still. Everybody was cooperating to move trucks on February 14th, but then all of a sudden it stopped. And this witness said, right, it stopped for many reasons. And then Brendan said, well, did Tom or anyone say they would renege and they weren't going to do it, to do their side? And the answer was no. So it didn't stop for convoy side reasons. And then the comment came out they couldn't move all groups. So here we go again. The OPS expecting the convoy truckers and leaders and organizers to do the impossible that they can't even do. And that's to get 100% consensus and buy-in from everybody. complete strangers and different groups. But yeah, here he is saying again, they couldn't move all of the groups. And then Brendan asked, he put his laptop down and he did the whole little Brendan thing. He's got a good style. And he goes, what groups? Go on, tell me which ones, which groups are you talking about? And then there were other groups that didn't want to move as far as he got with it. Great. Not even part of the deals. Those weren't the trucks talked about moving. They're not part of the 322 that Tom had control over. So here's this impossible goal line, moving the goal line, continuously moving the goal line, making it impossible for them to do it. I wonder why. They keep saying that they want to end the what they call occupation, but yet here they're not helping. They're not helping themselves or anybody else. Then the government of Canada came up. Again, they're just doing the same thing. They're just trying to set the boogeyman. So it was a difficult environment. I would agree with that. Well, that's a very open question. Was it a difficult environment because it was cold? February. Storm. Big storm. There's a whole bunch of reasons. A difficult environment where you're talking about your workplace was slowly. Like, that's such an open question. We don't even know what he's talking about. But yeah, difficult environment. I agree with that, he says. A large number of factions involved, says the government. Difficult to deal with. And I thought Diagolon was going to make their appearance again here. But Farfada did. So I still don't know who they are, but Farfada made their appearance again. And then the government said, I don't know why the government's saying this because it doesn't help them. The convoy didn't control all groups, and then the deal fell apart. Well, actually, Mr. Attorney, the deal fell apart. No, because the deal wasn't contingent on all groups. The deal was contingent on the groups they controlled. So you're changing the terms of the deal here, buddy. You can't expand it. We call it scope creep in tech and contract stuff. You can't just expand it without party consent. So the deal didn't fall apart. You changed it. You changed the terms and then called it vitiated. Vitiated meaning voided. It's no longer good. Good job there, Canada. And then Tamara mentions that they were moving to Wellington. So now he's using open source information. And Tamara put up a post saying, hey, we're moving everybody to Wellington, which was the city deal. They're working on it. But here's the government and their grand wisdom. Well, we found a counter post. Okay, guys, almost every single tweet I do will have a counter tweet. That's just nature, okay, of social, of open source data. So the fact that they found a counter tweet saying, hey, it's a lie, it's conspiracy, don't believe this, means nothing. It means less than nothing. It means the government is desperate beyond desperate if they're going to be pulling out things like that and say, hey, this matters to us. This one tweet says, that's a lie. Therefore, what we see here is a complete destruction of the plan, and we have to now pull out the tanks and the EA. That's ridiculous. That lawyer should be gone. Anybody that thinks that way inside of the government should be gone. That's dangerous to think. And by the way, people like him are not elected. These are our staff. This is our swamp, as we call it in the South. These are people who are in there by hiring, and they don't leave. The contracts will be full-time. We do have to clean up the government on many different levels. I'm just going to say that. There was no core group. So now here's the government very oddly saying there was no core group. The PLTs were doing what they could with everybody. I find that interesting. The government of Canada is now trying to establish that there was no central command on the truckers. There wasn't, but there was a core group of the larger group. You know who those are. Convoy Trucker, Tamara, you got Tom, you know who they are. But here's the government saying there was no group, central group, the core group. Well, then how are you expecting that non-core group that doesn't exist to move everybody? That was weird that they opened up the door themselves, that Tom wouldn't have had 100% buy-in. He couldn't have. There wasn't a core group. And they made the comment, the witness says the groups were fractured. Was this part of the problem that everyone wanted to go to Wellington? I found that one weird. What do you mean part of the problem? You didn't even let it finish. So the fact that everybody wanted to move to Wellington and go into a smaller footprint was a problem from the government side. I guess from the Canadian government side, because PPS said don't go to Wellington, then maybe they thought that was a problem. Maybe they're paranoia was telling them that, hey, if they all move here, then they're 2 steps away from taking us over. Whatever. But maybe that's part of their paranoia. They saw the plan was to move everybody to Wellington, and then they got all worried. At one point there, actually, for a good chunk of his testimony with the government of Canada, it was being spoon-fed. So the government was more than just giving leading questions. They were just giving the answers. Nobody was objecting. And he was just saying yes, yes, yes to all of them. And then I think the government screwed up again. So the government established that Tamara was not like a core leader because they said there is no core leader. There is no core group. So can they now drop her charges? Because her charges are around whether or not she controlled and enticed and got people to do stuff. But now the government's saying she's not a leader. So which is it? And then they dropped that famous date, January 6th. So here's the Canadian government for the first time in 10 days dropping Jan 6 as something that was around on their reports and their radar. Yeah, we may have another episode about that, but I'm pretty sure that every country that was part of a certain plan was preparing for a Jan 6 like event and provoked it. Canada, being Canadians, we didn't fall for it. So good job, guys. We move on to Jessica Barrow from the Ottawa Police Services, their lawyer. We get it again. So she replayed the video with the protester getting hit, and then they want to start injecting a bunch of context. That's another one of those drinking words for this, because context comes up all the time. I don't understand why you need context when you have video, because what context means in that context is they want you to not believe your lying eyes. They want you to see something else that's not there. And that's exactly what they did. We weren't disappointed. They did exactly that. Because they ended up, first of all, bringing up Farfada again. So the Ottawa Police Services lawyer brought that up. But this is the biggest joke I've ever heard. I want to meet this officer. I want to actually ask this person, did you really do that? And really? Like, really? So the video we're seeing an officer using the business end of a gun to do something to a person on the ground. It looks like striking. Looks like they're striking the person with the gun, with the business end. So super dangerous. But his response was, you can't see enough. What is happening is a person places a hold on the officer's leg. The officer believed his leg would be broken. He shouldn't be an officer. The officer used his weapon to release the hold. And the officer received medical attention in relation to this incident. Anybody believe that? Believe that for a second? Does anybody believe that? He actually believed his leg was going to be broken. He saw medical attention. I want to see receipts for that one. Give me the paramedic that said, yeah, I saw that officer. I don't believe that for a second. Come on, the internet, do me a favor. Find that original video that shows that and see where he goes after that particular officer. Just put a little arrow above his head as he's walking around after he strikes that guy and see if his next move was to limp to some other location off screen. Pretty sure that guy just circled back and got right back to business after they dragged him away. So if you know where that video is, that actual source, let's take a look at that one. What happens to that officer immediately after the striking with the gun? Is he limping? Does his leg almost come off? I'd like to know, because what we just heard from the government is they thought that leg was coming off and they had to go see the paramedics. That's the justification for striking them with the business end of a gun. At least they didn't deny that the striking was happening. So at least they tried to explain it. That's a good thing, because once we then get rid of this whole broken legs theory, what we are left with is an admission of assault. So I would like to see if we could take a look at that video and see if that officer was limping away. I kind of recall that he participated in dragging the guy away. So if he didn't break off and walk away from the engagement when his leg was released from the clutches of this protester, and he went right back to work, that would get rid of this narrative that his leg was going to come off. A couple more notes, people, and that's it. We're out of here. Commission Council came back, had some questions, re-examine again. It was OPP's decision that they no longer would honor the agreement was because the PM was doing the EA. Right. So what they did here was, wow, yeah, they brought up the notes. And I like lawyers like this. I can relate to her. She will recognize, and in her memory, she will remember documents that she's seen before. So that's good. So when it came up, she goes, yes, that's the one, because she recognized it. And this particular document said they canceled the plan. They canceled the OPS plan with the city and OPP and the convoy. They canceled it because the PM was going to invoke the EA. So once again, guys, I want to really, really emphasize this. The EA can never be used if there's any other options. So not only was there another option, there was an active plan being executed at the time. It's kind of like saying, you can't, I don't know where I'm going with that. You can't play a DVD player. Forget about it. I would go somewhere else. But the EA has to be the last resort. Nothing else is available. And now we hear that not only was there something available, there was a plan that was labeled phase 2.1 version 3.0. It was a pretty good plan. It didn't have a mission. So we didn't know what they were going to finish up doing, but they did have all the pieces, the elements, they like to call it, including the case law, the common law, the different laws that they were going to be utilizing. And that was all in place, executing. They were making progress on it. And then that all got shut off for the EA. That's not how the EA is supposed to work. Okay? That's not how the EA is supposed to work. So at this point, I think we're done on the question of whether or not the EA is justified. It's not. I think we've now established, without even convoy witnesses, that the EA was an overreach. So at this point, I think all we got left is who's responsible, whose names are going to come out, how much finger pointing can they do, and are they able to kind of save their butts on this? I think that's all we got left. Next week's going to be pretty rough for the government because it's going to be all convoy. And what I'm really looking forward to are the Government of Canada crosses of the convoy. I don't think those are going to go well at all. I don't think they're going to go well at all for the government. I think the convoy is going to stand up just fine because, again, the truth is on their side. And Tamara, I really hope that this gets everything cleared up for you, and the government has to do some sort of apology. Making you a martyr, arresting you, putting you in jail, ripping you from your house in Red Deer because they wanted to provoke something on Canada Day. That was all ridiculous. I'm so sorry that that happened to you. That sucks. But I think what we're hearing from this now is you guys did everything you can. I reached out to Tom this afternoon to give him a bit of a thanks. Here, let me share that with you because he's a good guy. He really is a good guy. I don't know why the government was so against trying to work with him. That was not nice. That was not fair. So just give me a second. So I reached out to him because I was getting empathetic for him as I'm hearing the story of how hard he was trying to work and get things done. And the government simply was making it difficult for him. Sorry, I got to find my mouse. My screen. You just give me a second. There it is. I lost my mouse. Okay. So the government doesn't want this to be shown. Yeah, I just reached out to Tom and I said to him, hey, Tom, just wanted to say thanks. It's clear that you were working so hard and did a good job the entire time. Hope you know there are a million that think just like me right now. Cheers, man. You know, he's sitting there and he's listening to this and he's sitting here reminiscing and remembering this. And he's a human. So it was cool that he responded. You know, he really tried hard to do the right thing. I agree. And I think it's clear. I think it's clear now that Tom and team were trying to do a good job. So we support them. We're going to see them next week. After that, Tom should be joining us on stream. We'll hear a little bit more about his side. But from what I'm seeing, I don't even need to hear much from his side. The government has really made it difficult. So many different ways. And it had so many different laws and so many ways to make this work out better. It almost seems like they tried to make it as worse as they possibly could. I got a couple of questions here. Canadian citizen, I don't know who you are, but thank you for joining. I don't know why that mouse is dead. Okay. Today's testimony of the EA beneficial but not needed. You're absolutely right. To see police need an Emergencies Act after deal to secure tow trucks fell through. What? CBC, that is amazing. That is amazing. So we all witnessed the testimony. The EA beneficial but not needed. We've heard that multiple times. And here's the CBC making a completely fake headline. There was no testimony that the police needed the Emergency Act after the deal to secure tow trucks fell through. That never happened. What are they actually referring to? Wow, you guys, all day you were listening to this. Wow. Narrative, not news. CBC, narrative, not news. What else there? Canadian citizen, you got the dirt, don't you? How do we get today's testimony to bench press not needed to CBC's headline? You're 100% right. Like, Canadian citizen, this is incredible. Let me confirm that. Here, let's just do this together. Let me confirm that that's even true. I'm almost baffled that that can't be true. The CBC didn't really say that, did they? Did they? Let's go find out. Let me just find a window for you. Here we go. All right. So, CBC. Did they really say that? CBC, police, emergency, emergency act. What was the quote there? Lawyer. There it is. Sure enough. My goodness. Are you joking me? All right. You've all just witnessed real time. We're in 1984 here. This is ridiculous. This didn't happen. Okay. 34 trucks had been secured before. Previous police testimony suggested, no, confirmed, it's called evidence. 34 trucks had been secured before the act was invoked. Yep, that's true. The deal with the police to secure trucks, that's when the protest fell through and the emergency act was needed to commandeer those vehicles. A lawyer acting. Nobody said that. And for starters, just so everybody knows, a lawyer saying something or even asking a question is not testimony. So for the CBC to use the wrong side of the microphone to point to as testimony, that's incredible. Wow. I hope you are all seeing this. This is not cool. Talking about what they're for. Okay. Plans of police are seeing. Okay. Sure. Yeah. We've heard that. Robert Bean, we heard him all day. He took over on the February 10th. Well, he took over on the 10th after skiing. And remember, it took him 3 days to get up and running on the 13th, but then he was up and running. Sure. Required that he did not need to rely on powers. Wow. So their headline doesn't match. Like, this is true. He did say that. So the article is not matching the headline. But in exchange, at the inquiry hearing on Wednesday, offered a different view. What? So they just told you the testimony said they didn't need it, and now they're just offering an opinion or narrative. But in exchange, at the inquiry hearing on Wednesday, offered a different view. Now they're just adding narrative. This didn't even come out today. Tow truck companies feared to be targeted. That didn't come out today, including death threats. That didn't come out today. Bernier said that he was able to get 34. Yep. By 13. So well before the Emergency Act. They were going to put crests on the trucks. Yeah, I heard that. Cover up the company marketing. Sure. The trucks said they were going to do that anyways. Sure. And then, wow, am I reading this wrong? Their headline doesn't match. They just throwing in narrative on a line, but even the rest of their article is not matching what they're saying. Okay, yeah. Entered. Yeah, I saw the letter for the first time. Yeah, it's new to him. In the February 22nd letter, so after the Emergency Act, does the CBC not know when the Emergency Act was done? It was done on 14th. So a letter on the 17th, not relevant to Emergency Act. So they're now arguing that this letter that nobody saw is proof that they need an Emergency Act? Highly reluctant. Yeah, they are. That's exactly what they're doing. So they're using a letter many days after, pointing to it as proof that something that happened in the past was necessary. Wow. Letter entering evidence on Wednesday. Securing agreement with tow truck requires some agreement. Sure, fine. Wow, these guys are incredible. Who wrote this? You should be ashamed. Did you really write this? Updated an hour ago. This is insane. All right, folks. That's our CBC, state media, Complete lie. The fabrication of that headline is a complete lie. Bernier was no, that didn't come out either. That didn't come out. He was frustrated with slowly. What are they doing? They're going to scapegoat slowly, aren't they? You got to keep an eye on your media and see what they're doing. And when they lie like this, slowly, I think they're going to have some more bad stuff to say about him, because this didn't come out. Bernier was not frustrated with slowly. In the documents required, never intended to be any delay. Okay, sure, yeah. You also didn't keep him abreast. And slowly resigned the next day. Absolutely, he did. You guys just stomped all over him. And we already heard how he resigned. It was a CBC article that pushed him out the door. CBC, you are not good. You're, wow. All right, folks, that's it. We'll end on that note. Oh, wait. Oh, I lie. I got one more thing for you. So for all of you that stuck around late, I got a special surprise for you. I did this for you while I was sitting here listening to some of the less interesting testimony. Oh, wait, Canadian citizen. I'll see what you have. Yeah. So you caught it too, citizen. CBC will quote the government lawyer instead of a testimony. Yeah, you caught that too. Wrong side of the microphone. They're not under any oath. They just can say whatever they want. Yeah, CBC grabbed the wrong side of the microphone. That's just horrible. That's just horrible. And quite the reach, by the way, CBC. That was quite the reach. And if that's all you got, that sucks. But I know millions of Canadians believe you, so that's horrible. Very for sure. Yeah, the article was closer to some of the real testimony, but it looks like the headline and then the section article, the bolding, basically everything bolding, you can question as misinformation, actually. All right, let me go to that surprise for you all. I made something for you. I think you guys are wonderful. So I had a bit of time. I did post it so you can find it on my YouTube, but I made a little video here with Brendan, and I hope you like it. And just hit me in the chat and tell me what you think.
Now, I understand this is an email from the Deputy Minister of Public Safety.
Yes.
Okay. And in the third sentence on the top paragraph, it says, "We have a big meeting this afternoon. Well, this will be discussed. So I really need your input." Right?
Yes.
All right. Did you know that that meeting was at 3:30 p.m. and that it was with cabinet and it was the incident response group of the political executive meeting, and that your proposal was provided to them?
No.
Okay. It was. I can tell you that. And then they invoked the Emergencies Act. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next, and we all knew it was coming, but we hoped it wasn't. And I thought I was going to make it through this, but I'm not. It hurts.
There you go. That's what I do on the side sometimes when I'm just chilling, listening, and it's not very interesting. I'll throw a video together. But yeah, that's Trudeau. I think that's what's coming. That was a pretty pivotal moment. We have a lot of those clips that we can put together now. I loved it, Clay. Yeah. And this is kind of where it's going to end up. I think that Trudeau's going to not be happy when this ends. For those of you who know what that clip is from, that's when Gord Downie passed away. Of course, our Prime Minister cried for that one, but nothing else. He just destroys our freedoms and hurts a bunch of Canadians, and that's okay. But Gord Downie passes, that will get him. All right, folks, thank you very much. That was a great day. We had some good testimony. No major hiccups with the tech, so that was great. And I figured out the mute button. So you have yourself a great day. We'll see you tomorrow. It will be 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. And I believe we are only going to get one witness tomorrow, which looks like it would be Thomas Carrick from the OPP. So what he's probably going to do is just some more truth bombs. So I'm going to say congratulations to Robert Drunham and Bernier from the OPS. You did a good job on telling the truth. I know it was uncomfortable for you. A lot of it sucked. You did your best to try and skirt some of the questions, but the truth came out. So we'll see you all. Oh, wait, you should tweet that out. Yes, it is tweeted out, Clay. It is tweeted out. So I put it on YouTube. I put it on Twitter. It's available. It's out there. We'll see what happens with it. And thank you very much, Clay. We'll see you tomorrow, 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, and the inquiry's at 9:30. Have yourself a good night, and we'll see you then. God bless. And if you like this video, remember to like and subscribe and press that notification button to receive more information like this. You can also follow me at yellowhead.vote to stay informed and get the inside scoop. Thank you.